Nurburgring. The sunset on race night on Saturday is 21:38 Central European time, and the sun comes back up officially at 05:23 in the morning. So what's that, 7 hours 35 or thereabouts of darkness. Very, very short amount of darkness at this time of the year. Unsurprisingly, already some debris on the exit of the pit lane, which everybody seems to be seeing and avoiding on the way out. Not really sure what that is. Looks like, let's have a quick look down there. Looks like a piece of maybe some tubing, maybe a brake cooling duct or something like that. I have to say I didn't notice, Bruce, any coming together. Maybe we get an opportunity. No, that's very odd. So it was the 54, was it?
I think it came off the 309 that was just running in front of it.
Definitely the Lexus ran over whatever it is.
Yeah.
On their website, the Mulman Motorsport Cayman was 309, and 54, by flicking down the incredibly long list of 120 plus cars, was the Novel Racing Lexus, the RCF. That's the only one of the Lexuses in the race. But funny little trip-ups early on, but I don't think any particular damage done. But again, John, in the interim, I was doing lots of research, just checking who was on which tyres, and they do change from session to session. But unfortunately, I made a bit of an error. A lot of the cars are carrying a Falcon logo above the front wheel arch.
Yes.
Doesn't mean they're on Falcon tyres.
No.
So I'm having to go back through my notes as they're fitting tyres up and down the pit lane and go, right, Goodyear, those are Michelin. So I'll get it right for later.
That is a Falcon are an event sponsor. Remember, this is not part. This is great. This is absolutely great. This is one of the last great single events in the world. It's not part of a championship, the Total ADAC Nurburgring 24 hours. But they do have sponsors, and one of those is Falcon tyres. So they are on all the cars, regardless of whose tyres they wear. It's also, we talked about this earlier on, Peter, it's one of the last bastions of tyre competition in the top classes. A variety of the classes, some of them have a sole tyre supplier, but in the top class, that's not the case. And I think last year there was 12 or 13 different manufacturers represented across the weekend. And I think it's great to see this. I know there'll be people who are shouting at the top of their voices about costs, but this is a test track for all of the major manufacturers of tyres and cars. So it's absolutely, for me, appropriate that we should have a freedom for tyre choice.
Well, I completely agree with you. I think if you on the subject of cost, if you're look at it from the tyre manufacturer's point of view, they put a lot of marketing dollars into motorsport. All of them do. And the thing is, there isn't a more effective way to get the best drivers in the world and the best cars in the world to put your tyres through their paces. Although I think we're going to be talking a lot about those tyres throughout the weekend. Obviously, we've got changeable weather all weekend long. It's going to be wet. And I'll refer our listeners back to Petit Le Mans 2015 when Michelin tyres on the Porsche 911 RSR were pretty handy to that car winning overall past all of the prototypes.
Past all of the prototypes on a number of occasions, because every time there was a full course caution and the safety car came out, they reset the field with the prototypes ahead of the GT cars. So Patrick Pilet, Nick Tandy had to overtake them several times, actually, in that. And there's a great story behind that Patrick Pilet asked the then head of Porsche GT Motorsport, Frank Stefan Walliser, who's now head of mission for Porsche 911 in total. He said, listen, if we win Petit Le Mans, can I buy the car from you? And Porsche are pretty careful about a bit like Ferrari, about letting the race cars go. And Frank said, no. And PP said, what about an overall win? And Frank said, yeah, if you win overall, I'll sell you the car. And before the start of the race, he went to Nick Tandy, PP went to Nick Tandy and said, right, we're in. We can have this. You want to do it? Do you want to jump into this? And Nick was like, yeah, because we're going to win overall. And at the end of the race, in fairness, Frank-Stefan Walliser, who I know pretty well now, and who is a very honourable man, he sold Patrick Pilet the car, and it is in Patrick Pilet's collection. It's in his garage. And 3 or 4 years after that victory, it went to Rennsport, having never run since it was turned off at the end of that race. And they changed the oil and warmed it up properly, spun it up properly, and ran it at Rennsport. And it was a thing of beauty. And Pilet loves telling that story. Tandy hates hearing that story because he wasn't in on the tail, which I think is very, very funny. Very, very funny indeed. 704 is the Glickenhaus, the bright red car that is heading back into the pit lane after an exploratory lap of the Grand Prix circuit at the moment. We've still got that situation on the front straight where you have the opportunity to go around and do the lap of the Grand Prix circuit and then either cut back into the straight or go back onto the start-finish lane and start straight and start a flying lap marked out by cones. That will disappear when we come to race at the weekend. Jim Glickenhaus very excited about the prospects this weekend of that 004C SCG Scuderia Cameron Glickenhaus machine. Just the one of them in the race, and already braving the conditions on the Nordschleife and heading down to Kallenhard, Martin Ranginger in the number 44 Falcon tyres, Foyleton Motorsports Porsche 911, down through Kallenhard, on and off the throttle, just balancing the car through the 3 right-handers before going down hard through the gearbox before the 4th and into the hairpin, dropping down here. Got his teammate right in front of him actually at the moment as they head towards the bridge at Adana, passing one of the Cayman GT4s. Normally you'd be braking as the road comes in at the right-hand side. Used to be a nice visual clue as you go across the bridge. There was a change in the tarmac as you rose up the other side, which is where you lifted off and turned in, but it's all been resurfaced now. So that's disappeared. The Lauda links, the Lauda left here, where Nicky had his terrible accident that effectively ended Formula One racing at this circuit. And now through the long, you can be so patient through the long right-hander as you start to climb the hill. 3 left-handers now, where it gets progressively tighter. The dirt on the road for Ranginger. He's climbing up through there. Even in a road car, last time I took the 993 through there, 135 miles an hour in a road car on road tyres. These guys going significantly quicker as they climb the hill. And it's all about feeling the grip at this point. You stay away from the curbs as you are going up towards the next major landmark, which is the base of the hill before the Caracciola Carousel, which is where Ranginger is now. He goes down through the box and turns in right-handed. Now climbing the hill again, and immediately you've got to be looking so far ahead of you. End of the advertising hoarding is about where you aim as you drop in. It happens to be AMG this year. Rattle your teeth out on the concrete of the carousel, pop out like a cork from a bottle, and then head into the middle part of the lap where so many corners look the same. And that is the skill of knowing this lap, Bruce Jones, where you can push, where it's a 4th gear flat out right-hander and where it's a 2nd gear brake hard right-hander, because you can't afford to make mistakes at that part of the circuit out in the country.
It's a piece of cake, just a mere 170 turns around the course of the lap. But of course, what they're getting now over the next half hour is fading light, falling light. They all look that little bit different. But anybody on this outlap and now starting to wind it up on the first fly will appreciate the track is uniformly dry, or certainly every millimetre I've seen so far. Got a little bit of shading from you talked, John, just about a little flurry of rain in the intervening period, but it is to all extents and purposes a clear track. Well, not a clear track just there for Martin Ragginger, because the GT4 Mercedes in his path has slowed him and allowed Lance David Arnold in the 33, the sister car to the 44 Falcon Motorsport Porsche, to pull that little bit clear. But it's the track is, I think, as good as it can be. A bit more rubber going down would be welcome, but right now you get to ride on board with the experts. So many drivers do so many races on the Nurburgring, and you can understand that every single one adds useful experience.
There is something, Peter, and I know you haven't been around the Nordschleife, but there is something quite magical about a circuit that is so wonderfully based in the past as the Nurburgring Nordschleife. I mean, we hear in F1 circles people talking about Monaco. Monaco would never be homologated as an F1 circuit now. It just, people would laugh at you and turn away. The Nurburgring Nordschleife, you look at it now and think, oh my God, how did they race Group C cars around there? How did they race Formula 1 cars around there? And yet with the GT3 cars that we're seeing here at the moment, they are spending less than 6.5 minutes, fewer than 6.5 minutes on the Nordschleife itself, which just goes to underline the development in street-based racing cars, and particularly, we were talking about this earlier on, particularly, Peter, the tyres, because they allow such magnificent performance nowadays.
I think, yeah, it's a combination of all of those things, but there's a strong argument to say that the tyre technology has probably advanced the most in terms of the pure lap time. I mean, to give a bit of context, for the Nordschleife, the last time the Nürburgring 1,000 kilometres was held on the Nordschleife before moving to the Grand Prix circuit was when Stefan Bellof obliterated the lap record on the 28th of May 1983, did a 6 minute and 11 second lap in 1983, nearly 40 years ago. I mean, you have to let that one sink in. And we mentioned in qualifying this morning Timo Bernhard's record of 5 minutes 19 in the 919 Evo, and Timo said, yeah, but I did the lap, but he said, I would never do that in a million years in a Group C car, no way. And I said to him, you know what you've done, Timo, is you've given people of my generation, you've given them an appreciation of what Stefan Bellof actually did that day, which deserves its place in motor racing folklore, I believe. But
doesn't it also, and that was in qualifying, so of course it's not a race lap record, but I mean, if you're looking at just the times, that is extraordinary. But doesn't that tell you, Peter, how good, people will look at these GT3 cars, they'll hear us talk about these GT3 cars, and in some ways they will dismiss them because they're ordinary GT3 cars. I still have, to me, somewhat bizarre conversations with people who don't watch IMSA because there's no LMP1 cars in it. And yet the current set of DPIs are doing the same sort of times as the full fat 1200 horsepower P1 Peugeots and Audis diesels were doing. And these GT3 cars doing a 625, 623 or whatever they are around the Nordschleife. Now I accept that the Nordschleife has changed a little bit and it's a lot smoother than when Stefan Bellof did it. Well, he was doing that in what was then effectively an LMP1 car, Group C car. These are GT3 cars. Nobody can tell me these guys aren't hanging it out and aren't giving it everything. You've only got to watch any of the onboard footage that you can find on YouTube or anywhere else from these guys. These guys are racing as hard now as they've ever raced before on the Nürburgring Nordschleife, aren't they? Oh,
for sure. I mean, if you look at an onboard of Kevin Estre in a GT3 RS road car, let alone the race car, and
Lars Kern,
or Lars Kern, his teammate,
hat off.
Oh my word! I mean, I tell you what. Here's a question for you, John. Of course, there are some Porsche Cup cars in the field in the SP7 class, but they're the 991 generation. This new 992 Cup car looks like a bit of a spaceship. I tell you what, when Manthey get their hands on those things, they're going to be ruffling some SP9 feathers when they finally or inevitably come to play here at the Nurburgring.
It's a good point that you make there, Peter, because the new 992 Cup car, in common with the 992 road-going GT3, double wishbone front suspension, wider track, different diameter wheels front and rear on the road car, although in fairness on the Cup car they're still using the 18-inch rims with the Michelin N-Series Pilot Sport tyres. But those cars, at the test at Sebring, when they were having their debut in America, they were lapping at around the same speed, or perhaps, dare I say it, a little bit quicker than the GT Daytonas, which are current GT3 cars. And that was with guys having been told, by the way, guys, you're testing before the first round of the new for 2021 Carrera Cup North America, and if you crash, we have no more shells. We have no new shells in North America at the moment, so you're going to have to be a bit sensible. And they were still lapping at GT3 speeds. What is the GT3, the full house GT3 992 going to be like? We've got an incident out on the circuit just beyond the Niki Lauda left, heading up to Bergwerk, and that is one of the Porsche Cayman GT4s on that. That's the blue and white car. I feel I should know that car, Bruce.
I think it might be the Schmickler Motorsport car.
I knew I could rely on you.
Well, no, don't rely on me. Don't bet your house on it, otherwise the house goes away. But again, there are so many Caymans in so many classes, John. I just want to get it right before I announce who has gone off on the exit of X-Muller.
Yeah, I have several different entry lists here, and I'm flicking through the one that has photographs on to try and help me. It's a very distinctive colour scheme. I think you might it have been 301, the APS Rennsport car?
It could be. Some of them, when you click on them, there appears to be no photograph, but when you click on the grey box, so will reveal itself, as I discovered literally 3 minutes ago.
Ooh. Right, okay, there's a whole evening of excitement for Peter and I.
It's like opening an advent calendar in the run-up to Christmas.
My advent calendar last year, and thank you to the responsible adult for this, was a Porsche 911 2-litre ST, which you built out of bits from the advent calendar, which was absolutely fantastic. Coming up to 10 to 9 at the Nurburgring, the light beginning to fade, headlights being able to be picked out a wee bit more, so we will go into darkness in this session, and that is hugely important to get yourself orientated on a racetrack which is difficult enough in daylight, never mind anything else. That Porsche is still parked.
301 parked across the track, the EPS Rennsport car.
It is the 301,
is it? Tail.
Oh.
I think so. Again, it's a high shot. One of the beauties of the Nordschleife is it has so many corners. One of the problems of the Nordschleife is having cameras, and therefore we rely, for some of the greatest shots of all, on a helicopter that chased them around the circuit, and it flew past. But the car was small beneath. Meanwhile, at other points on the circuit, the likes of David Pittard still pressing on, a British driver who's really made the Nürburgring Nordschleife his home. He's driving one of the 3 Alpenhorst Motorsport SP9 class M6s, and he's got past the scene of the incident and now just doing what he needs to do, just getting as much speed out of the car, getting the tyres to work as they should around the final quarter of the lap, and going very well indeed. Not quite at the very sharp end of the field, but in fact, 4th place. Sorry, last time round he moved up to 4th place overall, so he's within 1.5 seconds of the ultimate pace, still in the hands of the number 6 Mercedes of Nico Bastia at the end of that first session.
Well, a bit like the judges on The Voice, I think we have got 3 of us in unanimity at the moment, because I think Peter and I agree with Bruce there. Peter, you're happy with that? It's 301 came in the Cup 3 class.
Well, this is the shall we call it the virtual advent calendar of Nurburgring cars.
I love it.
It changes. You click on the car, and it actually changes its stripes. So it's got its race livery is different to the whenever it got its photograph taken. And there is a few cars like that.
Guys, I
have
think
you?
open advent calendar picture for 304. I think it'd be one of the K Kramer racing cars.
do
It's more
you?
white on it. In fact, I'll bet your house on it, John. 304, which is driven by Ashin Fatermi, Henning Kramer, Jean-Francois Bruno, and Yevgen Sokolovsky. And whoever's driving it isn't driving it because it's still nose in across the circuit.
Hello to Dan Wells. Dan, great to know that you are tuned in and celebrated a birthday last week. Sitting on the sofa with a chilled beverage, watching the coverage. Is there any better way to go? And by the way, if you're in the UK, search out down by Salisbury, just off one of the big main roads down there, the Haven. It's Dan's family's restaurant, which has a fabulous reputation. I was going to try and pop down there this week, but the clampdown in France didn't stop me going down there, but it meant that we had to reorganise the ELMS coverage this weekend. But Dan, I promise I'll pop down and see your dad and your sister in the next few days. In fact, we almost met Bruce down there for a bit of a meet-up, which then, as I say, couldn't happen because of a couple of things. Hard workers, great food, and always a bit of a motorsport chat down there. So if you, it's off the A30 if memory serves. I'm sure Dan will send me a note if I've got that horribly wrong. But look it up. It's the menu is sumptuous and worth popping down there. Somewhere near Thruxton, of course. Always worth popping in round there as well. Mirko Bortolotti out at the moment in the Hanguk-sponsored Lamborghini Huracan. Hanguk, one of the tyre companies, along with one of the car companies, who over in Gottlieb Daimlerstrasse, which is barely a quarter of a mile from the Dottinger Ho and runs parallel to it, have their technical centre, and the testing that goes on around the Nordschleife on what are called the industry days is legendary. Plenty of photographers out there looking at new cars going round there, disguised cars going round there, and even in fact sometimes on the tourist laps, the tourist forum. Last time I was there, I think I was passed by a new version of a Mercedes, the MG GT3, as it headed on to the Nordschleife. I was in an Alfa Giulia Quadrifoglio diesel, so I wasn't going to give him a hard time, in fairness. But
when you see, John, something that you've never seen before,
yes.
I was driving a Toyota RAV4, eat your hearts out, ladies and gentlemen, but it was in Namibia. That's very cool, and we were racing to get to the airport to fly home, and then suddenly I would suggest 4, perhaps 6 cars that I'd never seen before came bang, 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 past me the other way. Couldn't get a camera out. It was some while later before I finally saw some spy shots of the original Audi TT. That could have been a ching-ching moment, but alas for Jones, it wasn't. But it's safe to say I think you're fairly far from prying eyes if you're charging up and down in Namibia.
you'd hope so.
You would, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Good roads too.
You really would. The Haven Salisbury is at Thursday. www.thehaven-salisbury.com, and I was right, it is just off the A30, the London road. Tell them we sent you. Always guaranteed a good welcome, fabulous food, and if required, a bit of motorsport chat. I'm going to try and do a bit of a meet up there later in the year. In the pit lane, plenty of action going on, and quite clearly things getting darker. The G-Tech competition, Porsche Cayman GT4 Club Sport 718. That's the Patrick Grüter, Fabio Grosser, Max Kronenberg and Ben Bünigel driven car, black and red. Surely one of the biggest successes of Porsche's road and race cars in recent years, the mid-engine, Porsche going back to mid-engine. I still don't understand why people haven't taken to the mid-engine Porsches. The Boxster, when the 986 came out, pretty much saved the firm, used a lot of the same components as the then 996, 911. That's why it was so important. And then the development of the Boxster and subsequently the hardtop Cayman through the various iterations. And just for those of you who perhaps haven't heard me say this before, the type numbers, so 986, 981, 718, all of those, you always refer to those as in those terms, whereas the model number, so 917, 911, 968, that is Porsche speak. I've been pulled up on that by Porsche in the past, and there's a distinctive difference between the type number and the model number. Those mid-engine Porsches are such a lovely thing to drive and can handle loads more power than ever the road cars have, although in fairness they've gone back to a 6-cylinder. There is a 4-litre now GTS version and GT4 version of the what is now the 718 versions of those cars, and with a bit of luck and a fair wind, you should be able to bring your real world road test on the 718 Cayman soon.
Now, one of the things that always strikes and is very much part of the Nurburgring 24 hours, of course, is the diversity, the huge number of classes. And when looking at the top class, SP9, John, they're driven as smoothly as possible, don't have the ultimate power. You were talking earlier, comparing them to, prototypes from the past and how the drivers are absolutely flat out everywhere. But the cars that look most as though they're being driven flat out are, of course, the TCR category cars. We only have 6 of them in the race, which is a bit of a shame because they're just so dynamic, skittering around the circuit. And the Hyundai 130N, what a driver lineup they've got there. Luca Engstler, Hendrik Still, who's at the wheel at the moment of 831, and Jean-Carl Verde. And of course, there's WTR, TCR championship action here as well as the 24 hours this weekend. So quite a few of the top TCR drivers, 2 timing, but they buck from curb to curb and they're very, very skitterish through the corners, and they must be absolutely exhausting to drive in a 24-hour race, but they certainly make me smile. Yeah,
the WTCR race this weekend is over just a couple of 3 laps, but it does have the competition debut of the new RS3 Audi and the new version of that car, which Chris Renke and the rest of Audi Sport Customer Racing are very excited about. And we're seeing that before we've seen the road-going version of that car, which is extraordinary, but sort of right here at the Nurburgring, as we were discussing in the earlier programmes. Sorry, Peter, what were you going to say there before Bruce and I were chatting about whatever it was we were chatting?
Well, I was also going to break the golden rule of no talking about model numbers before dark, but
no, that's fine here.
Yes, I think it's brilliant that Porsche brought back the 718 name, because those cars were, when Porsche was barely 15 years old, and they're bringing out these well, of course, they're barely 5 years old when they brought out the 550 Spider, which was the mid-engine one, and then that very quickly morphed into the 718, which of course had a 4-cylinder boxer engine. So there is a lot of historical links, and of course those cars did incredibly well, did a heck of a lot of giant killing right here at the Nürburgring.
And would you not take a 914 any day? A 914 any day of the week? 914
an orange Brumos 59. Yeah.
A 914 6, yes, but even a 4-cylinder. So when you look at what Porsche do, particularly with their sports cars, there's history written all over it. And when people criticise the Cayman and the Boxster for not being quote-unquote proper Porsches, I'm afraid I just have to say to them, "Pa, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong." And anyone who's driven one of those more modern mid-engine Porsches would absolutely understand why pound for pound, euro for euro, dollar for dollar, the performance levels that you get out of those cars are absolutely superb. And listen, I've spoken to plenty of people in Porsche Club GB and Porsche Club America who will tell you they are better value than the 911. Dare I say that? It's not an uncommon chat that people have. Why would you bother with a 911 when you can have a Cayman with a 4-litre flat 6 nowadays for 30 grand cheaper? It's an interesting chat.
And you might get one.
Well, that is the other point. That is absolutely right. You've got half a chance of possibly getting one. More debris on the circuit. This is a Cayman right-hand headlight that has come adrift down at the bottom of the Grand Prix circuit, which has been nicely moved off the track by a couple of BMWs. Oh, that was fairly thoughtful of them, Bruce, there.
Yeah, very kind. I mean, they can charge the others for saving them a puncture, but the pale blue and white Cayman we saw, we still think it's the GTEC competition number 304, K Kramer Racing example. That's been pulled off through a gap in the barriers. That's not troubling anyone, but obviously upsetting the team, because this 3-hour session has turned to be about 10 minutes for them before it was curtailed. Very little damage in the first qualifying session. This second qualifying session, I noticed the 105 Racework Motorsports 325i BMW in the SP4 class something had clattered into the back of it, so that's limping home with its rear bumper hanging down at a jaunty, if you wish, sort of angle, but generally very clean at the moment. And I think everybody reveling, John, in the fact the track is dry for now and uniform.
I think we need to go back to our original thought, which was the EPS Rennsport 301 GmbH
really?
machine. Yeah, I've been checking the tracker and the ticker, and I do think it's a 301 that's pulled off to the side. It's very tough to tell, but I think that car is off just beyond Bergwerk, or at Bergwerk, before Bergwerk, which is where we identified that issue. I'm talking about times, gentlemen. Top of the times at the moment, Patrick Assenheimer for Team HRT AMG. Mercedes, of course, at 8:23. Roughly speaking, Mr. Jones, what we saw this morning?
I think it's actually the same time. The sessions seem to be combined. It's 8:23.596.
Absolutely right. Yes,
so the times stay as they were, but that was Nico Bastian. But what we do have now is one of the Fricadelli Porsches right on the tail, just over a quarter of a second in arrears, and Fred Makabiki at the wheel of that at the moment. So now we've got 2 seconds flat covering the top 5. Mercedes, Porsche, Audi, BMW. Then for good measure, the 5th one, another Audi. But it's the number 6 HRT Mercedes, Patrick Assenheimer at the wheel. He's top of the charts, or that car is at the moment. Fred Makabiki second for Fricadelli Racing at Audi Sport Team Car Collection. Man who's done it, been there, worn the T-shirt, etc. Christopher Haase, third fastest.
Talking earlier on this week about the Toyota Corolla Altis, which originally was entered with Sutipong Spitterach and Natavuda Charansikita Wanata, who's known as Mad Cow back in Thailand, Manat Kula Planont and Natapong Horticum. I'm not sure that those are the drivers who are taking part in that, but that is the Toyota Gazoo Racing Team Thailand. I've worked with Natavuda Charansikita Watana before in the Race of Champions out in the Ramanganjala Stadium out there, and the man is an absolute megastar in his home country, more for his rallying exploits, but he is very, very good at anything he does. And in fairness, Toyota Gazoo Racing Team Thailand have bought a variety of Toyotas here down through the years, and that Corolla Altis, which is sort of a crossover as such, but it's a, remember the Golf Plus and the Golf Match, or the original, what was the extra high Fiesta called? I can't remember, but it's the same sort of Fusion. Well done. Oh, yes, well done, gentlemen. Thank you so much. It's the same sort of concept as that. Excellent Anorak behaviour by my two co-coms there. And yet they have done very well. They're in the SP3 category with a couple of other cars in that. I think we decided there was 4 cars in that category over the weekend, including is the class, I think, that has the Dacia Logan, or is that just SP3 and the other one's SP3T, isn't it? So it has the turbo on it.
Dolly mixture class.
It is the dolly mixing class. You're absolutely right.
But
oh, you're going to fit in so well here, Lisa. You really are.
You've never seen a class with a Dacia Logan, a Toyota Corolla Altis, a Toyota GT86, and a 1980s Opel Manta in one class.
Did you see the GTE Mark 1 electric version that Opel have pushed out? How lovely does that look? I mean, all right, whether it ever makes production's not the point, but Resto Mod on an E-style E is actually a really interesting concept, isn't it?
Well, Renault have done the same. They've released a concept of a Renault 5 electric, and I think it's well. Just look at the attention. I know it's not electric, but look at the attention the Alpine A110 got when it came out, and still continues to get. And I think it's a really tasteful homage to the original.
I think they should really be bold and go for the Renault 4, frankly. Get those seats out for your picnic.
Wait. The Renault 4 is about to be reborn as an all-electric car, Bruce. So you are spot on. The Stellantis group, which is about half the car manufacturers in the world, it would seem, at the moment. And I was reading this in Auto Express, which is still the best weekly buy that you can have for anything if you're automotive minded. The Renault 4 is coming back as an all-electric platform. So there you go. And it is going to take some of the styling cues from the original car.
Well, I think that'd be great, because as a child, if I was lucky enough to go camping in France, what I loved was the fact that the cars were so unutterably French. You know, the Renault 4s, the Peugeot 304s, the Panhards, which are my absolute favourites, because I'd seen nothing like those in my sort of home counties upbringing and then living overseas. And I love the fact that German cars were German and Italian cars were Italian, but French, they couldn't be anything else. And I do sort of rather miss the fact that the styling has become sort of less dissimilar, let's say. And I thought French cars at the time just were magnificent.
Well, and you know, there's a family story which I'm pretty certain is apocryphal, that my first words were Vauxhall and Viva, and that, you know, even when I was a wee toddler, I could spot the cars. I struggle to spot different cars now because they are sort of generic. And race cars, particularly at the sharp end of things in Formula One, Bruce, and you and I talked about this with Andrew Marriott at our coverage of the Monaco Historique. If you painted all the current F1 cars black, or in fact, if you just left them carbon, would you be able to tell them apart? You could, back in the day. Now it'd be rather more difficult, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I know. It is a big loss. You can see why it's happened and how it's happened. Of course, aerodynamic tweaks now less easy to come by. They take a uniform approach, and what works for one, and then they get very upset if suddenly, dare I say, is that rear wing flexing, etc., etc. We'll keep moving. Certainly some of the rear wings around here are flexing a bit, but that's because they're hitting the curbs as they're trying to make the shortest line around the lap. It's supposed to be 25.378 kilometres, and I think some of the very best pros here are making it just that tad shorter.
I think you're absolutely right, Peter. You're a bit have a little less life experience than Bruce and I. So what? I to say what I did there, Bruce. Really, you know.
Yes,
come on.
Diplomatic.
What then? What are the cars of your childhood that you look at now and think of as classics, because it tends to be, doesn't it, the cars that first attract your attention as a relatively young person.
Well, for me, it all started for me in 1995 when Colin McRae won the World Rally Championship. And for a young Scotsman to win the World Rally Championship in a Subaru Impreza, which up to that point was really a farmer's runaround, let's be honest. And it became a boy racer's dream overnight. And it was the hills in Scotland where I lived were just echoing with the sound of flat four Imprezas for the next 15 years. So, things like a 22B Impreza, yes, please. But also, I've got also coming from the Gran Turismo generation. So, Japanese stuff again. What is Japanese stuff? R34 Skyline.
R34 Skyline. You're talking my language there, young man.
But it's very hard to look past a McLaren F1 GTR. Those cars, and the cars of their era as well. They're hard to look past those. But there's a real-world example and a very much not real-world example.
Did you see recently that Mitsubishi UK, which sadly is sort of being wound up at the moment, is Mitsubishi drawing their horns given the current circumstance, sold off their heritage collection? And same sort of eras you're talking about, the Subarus, of course, you had the Evos, and there were some phenomenal cars coming up for auction that went for big money.
Didn't the Tommy Mäkinen go for over 100 grand?
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? I still thought that was worth. I saw Marino Franchitti, who is the previous owner of my 993. We never say we owned it. We just keep it for the next generations. I've got no clue who I'm handing it on to. But he said, if I had the money, I would have bought for that. And I kind of wish I'd said to him, we should chip in and buy that, because it was so original. It was perfect.
You two have drank the Kool-Aid. You really have. Yeah. 100 grand for I mean, I would you could buy a GT3 for that money.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. Well, you can't though. That's the problem, because people are selling them for 325 grand. There's your issue. Hello to Kevin McLaren, who's listening in. Really Irish Kevin, as we know him. It's been a while since we've had the opportunity to sit and have a wee dram with him and talk about cars. Kevin, I hope you're well. Good to know that you're tuned in and qualifying too across the RSL network with Peter Mackay, Bruce Jones and John Hindorf in the Global Broadcast Centre, and still with over 2 hours and 17 minutes to go of this session. The evening drawing in, as my grandma might say, the nights are drawing in, she would say. Martin Ragginger down the Dottinger Hole at the moment. 3 wide for a moment, 3 across the track, just coming past where you would normally pull off on the tourist far, and big flashing of lights side by side with the Chrome Racing Porsche as well. And that's that's a GT3 AMB entered car, but still very, very quick indeed. That's about the drivers. No, actually, that's not Bruce, is it? The Chrome car. Sorry, Peter. That's a 911 Cup class car, isn't it? That was quick in a straight line.
It certainly was. But we do see that sort of over the years, the ability in a straight line. Of course, around the course of the whole lap, they will lose out. Can I just throw one little Mitsubishi moment in? We just talked about that a short while ago. Drove past about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Drove past Mitsubishi's old British headquarters in Cirencester, and the car I would have wanted to pick out of their collection was the Dangan ZZ, just under 600 cc's, turbocharged engine, small enough to drive down a footpath. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Sounded fantastic with a tiny little water-cooled engine. And I remember a friend of mine who tended to drive 911 saying, "I'm not going to be seen in that." I said, "Take the seat." He couldn't stop laughing. It was the ultimate city car. Not the world's greatest looker, but if ever you get a chance to look at a Dangan ZZ, do take a look at it quite seriously, because in terms of smiles per mile, that was an absolute cracker of a car back in the early 90s.
That was, they all came out, Bruce, didn't they, of the Japanese regulations, the K cars, effectively. That were all tiny wee. There was sports car versions of them. There was little almost crossover versions of them. They tried to make limos out of them. I remember Suzuki did a little two-door sports car that looked like a Dodge Viper that was shrunk in the wash. There was the Daihatsu.
That was the Cappuccino.
The Cappuccino, yes, that's right. And then there was the Daihatsu Copen, 3 cylinders. Fabulous amount of engineering in those cars, though.
No, exactly. They were very clever little things, but they were all immense fun. I think the Honda Beat, the Suzuki Cappuccino, it's Titchy Dangers. Anyhow, we'll put a few hooks out there and see what we manage to draw in.
Yes, obviously no under 1600cc cars in this event for quite some time. I kind of understand why, but I do miss some of the little Daihatsus that ran around here from various privateer teams when we had 200 plus cars, limited to 170, just under 130 this weekend at a 9:15 in the evening here in the Eifel. The 704 bright red and white, that is the Glickenhaus running at the moment out in the gathering gloom, as we mentioned, and that at the moment has who behind the wheel? It was Thomas. Sorry, say again, Peter.
I think it's Westy at the wheel of
is
the
it Westy?
SCG 004. Glickenhaus, could you call him a Glickenhaus factory driver? With
yes, no, absolutely.
Yeah,
yes, because he's part of the Le Mans Hypercar program with Franck Mayer, who is another one of the drivers in that 004C this weekend.
I tell you what, don't we need more Jim Glickenhauses in this world?
What about his P45 that he built on what was then the 360 platform and raced here? Oh my goodness, fantastic. There is something about that Glickenhaus. I accept that, you know, it has to draw on various cars and influences, Peter. There's certainly a look of Honda NSX at the back of that car. You can see there's a bit of Ferrari in that as well. But there's something that I think works about that car. It looks really, it does look like a proper thing. And I think they've done really well to develop their own identity. I really do.
I totally agree, and I really sincerely hope that they're able to. I mean, obviously they're going to be exclusive cars. I really hope they can produce the amount of cars that they want to make for road use, because I know that's a big part of Jim Glickenhaus's ethos, that whatever you drive, you can race it and you can drive it on the street. And I love that, because it's so rare now that you could have a car that you could drive on the street, take it onto the circuit, compete with it, and drive away. I mean, for example, I was reading Jackie Stewart's book a couple of years ago, and he used to pick a Jaguar E-Type demonstrator off the family forecourt and go and win races with it.
Yeah. Oh, magnificent, though,
gone are those days.
But that, in some ways, Bruce, don't we all yearn for that in some respects? And isn't that even what... Right, first of all, this event, you look at some of the cars, particularly in the Nurburgring Langstrecke Series and also here, and frankly, talking to Peter Kate last year, winning his class in a Cayman, which other than the race livery was pretty much standard. ACO want cars at the front of their field at Le Mans that look more like road cars than spaceships. Listen, I love the technology. I'm not going to get into that argument now, but there is a part of me that says that isn't a bad idea, to be honest.
No, and I actually think there is space for all of that. And anybody who's just for the first time looking at the Nurburgring 24 hours, know it's the 49th running, what kept you, or the NLS races, the diversity. You've got the specials classes of the 30 potential classes or whatever, then you've got the production classes. And yet some of those cars look remarkably similar, but a small number of tweaks does put them in the different classes. And I really like the fact that you could pull something pretty much out of your garage and bring it here and race in a production class. And then who knows, if you fancy a bit more speed and find a bit more money, you move up. I'm all for anything that encourages people into the sport. Some are lucky enough to do it as teenagers. Some have to wait until they've earned the money themselves. It might mean they're the wrong side of 40, 50 or even 60, but they can still come and race on this, the ultimate race circuit in the world. And for the fans, we have some this year, but not as many, of course, as we've had over the decades, lining almost every centimetre of the circuit through the forest. But they will have their favourite cars. They will have a road car version. And so if there's a production class, it has a special resonance for them alongside. It's like supporting two football teams, John. You might have your team and then one that you've always got a soft spot for, possibly in another division. Yes. But, you know, you look to the production version of your car that's out there in the race and give it a little cheer every time it picks up a position. Yeah, that is a very good point. I like that analogy. I really do. Hello to Ingo Matter, who is listening in at the moment in Europe rather than being based in Asia at the moment. The man behind Absolute Racing. And he over here until Le Mans, I believe. Oh, the Altis has come to a grinding halt, and we've got a code 60 purple board out at the moment. One of the DMSB cars out there, the recovery vehicles, to try and pull that away. Notice the Mercedes this year. It used to be old two-door Jeep Cherokees, the original Jeep Cherokees. A couple of those when I was in Middle East in the Gulf War. And that Altis is not moving at the moment, so there is a wee bit of problem. Ingo, good to hear you listening, and best of luck. Been good, actually good start to the season for Absolute in the cars that they run in the Porsche Carrera Cup Asia Championship, with a couple of victories so far in the various classes, although all sport I see has been curtailed in China for at least a month and a half or so, so that's going to mean more issues with calendars towards the end of the year. But Ingo will find his way to a racetrack in Europe to enjoy himself, I'm sure. So we're down to just over 2 hours to go. I'm told by the boss that our niece, Jessica Barry, who's the, I believe, the youngest curator of a major art gallery in the UK at Aberdeen, is putting her name on the 993. Interesting. I'll have to have a word with her about that. Felix von der Leyen is struggling for Taycan Racing. Just come over the bridge at Adana. Not quite got up to the left-hander, the Lauda Lynx, and that car is without power, and he's trying to restart it, so that's going to be a problem, as the number 911 Porsche from Manthey is back in the pit lane, sitting in third position at the moment with a time from earlier on. What I'd kind of like to know is who has improved this evening. Well, I can tell you that René Rast has, for Audi Sport Team Land in the number 29 Audi R8 LMS. 8:24.996 is their best time of today. And Bruce was entirely correct. The very clever timing system at the Nurburgring Nordschleife, and I'd forgotten this because I didn't cover this race this way last year. I was on site doing Audi TV whilst the RSL team covered it, covered the whole race. They do manage, Bruce, to effectively give us the situation as it stands right now. So the number 6 car is the time that car put in the earlier session. Yeah, exactly so. But really the story, I suppose, we just looked at the Manthey Racing 911, number 911, and that has just improved into that third place. It's not the fastest Porsche, that's the 31 Porsche, one of the two from Fricadelli Racing. But what we've generally seen is a tightening up of the top about 8 drivers. In fact, 2 minutes almost flat covers the top 9 down to Josh Burden's KCMG Porsche. So it is closing. And don't forget, at the start of the first qualifying session early this day, just before the cars went out, how typical, you cried, the rain came down, particularly at the far side of the circuit. And we had drivers going around and going a dozen seconds faster than the best of the rest. And then they in turn were toppled by a similar margin, just emphasising how wet it is. But now we've got a uniformly dry track, and that's why the times are closing right up. But still, that's number 6 HRT Mercedes sitting pretty at the top, but the margin is just over a quarter of a second. So one good lap from someone else, and we could have a different name at the top. But we've still got loads of time left, just over 2 hours in this 3-hour evening into night session at the Nurburgring. So do expect some faster times early on. And they are, John, as we talked earlier, largely just doing those longer runs,
yes,
getting every one of the 4 drivers through their roster.
I thought it was interesting talking to Klaus Bachler, Bruce, earlier on. He has to do a couple of laps in each of the cars. Any driver who's entered in more than one vehicle has to do at least 2 flying laps in each of the cars during one of the qualifying sessions. Now, there are 3 qualifying sessions plus the top 30 shootout, but that takes a bit of logistics management as well. Make sure that you don't forget if you're in the other car to get it. Amazing, isn't it? I've mentioned the 993, and Shea Adams said, surely I could have the 993. Find out how your friends are, don't you? Let's go through a couple of tweets at the moment. Alan Prosser, hello Alan, king of the screen grab, Alan. During the race he'll be enhancing. Yeah, brilliant. Lanzarote Camel on Twitter. Twitter at RSL_studio, hashtag RSLN24. Nissan also made a twin-charged Micra called the March Turbo. Supercharged, then the turbo took over at the height. I remember that car. That was another little rally car, the March Turbo. There was a few like that. Wickerbill. I remember seeing the Suzuki Cappuccino for the first time when visiting Great Eccleston to watch the tractor pulling. And what about the Skoda Felicia pickup as well? So 1990s in that bright yellow beer watch colour. Oh yes, absolutely right. Hello to Laura Plattman, Leica ambassador, photographer and journalist extraordinaire. She's tuned in this evening, and suffice to say, she's having some domestic issues. She's running another bath this time with hot water. Laura, nice to know you're tuned in. We've all been there. Stephen Lloyd says, loving the coverage. N24 fading light, can't beat it. Duncan Vincent has got the Aberfeldy 12-year-old out. Oh my goodness. From the distillery at the bottom of the road of the Mains of Merthley Farm, right at the River Tay, just outside Aberfeldy. I remember that from my childhood. Oh, that's going to get very, very messy later on if I crack open a bottle of the Aberfeldy as well. Hello, Duncan. Nice to know that you're tuned in. Stathis Cotto at RSL_studio. RSLN24 is the hashtag. Top 30 tomorrow. Yes, it is. So you haven't missed that yet. Listen, if you've not seen that before, even if you have, don't miss it. If the weather stays fine, it will be the fastest the cars go all weekend. Gareth Evans is down in his shed doing a bit of work on a 1/44th scale Harrier this evening. And if you've got anything you want to speak to us to, at Specutainment. Peter, 2 hours to go in this session, and we're starting to see the first. It's beyond the gloaming now. We're into twilight now, aren't we? This is starting to get interesting as far as the light levels are concerned.
This could be our golden period of this qualifying session because the track is completely dry. There is still plenty of forward vision for the drivers, but probably only for the next 20 or 30 minutes. So the drivers who are out there at the moment, and at the moment I am pleased to say, and I've probably just jinxed it, no slow zones and no code 60s. So There you go. Wait for one to pop up on the time screen now. But yeah, good opportunity for the drivers to set their fastest times of the day. And for those SP9 cars that aren't already qualified into Q2, into top qualifying, they need to get a move on.
Yeah, it's always an important part of the whole weekend and the lead up, Bruce, to get the blue light, to get the top 30. There used to be a couple of spaces still up for grabs. I'm not sure that that's still the case now. Have we got the top 30 all qualified in now for tomorrow evening?
Well, I'm going to take a look at that later on. Now, I just can't drag my eye away from what's happening on the track. This is the golden time, as Peter said. It's the magical time. This is when the drivers, they don't want to do the early stuff. They want to have this crossover period. It's so spectacular. And I love this tweet from Ian McCarthy, regular fan of the show. He said, I do love this time of year. There's more overtaking action on a quali lap on the Nordschleife than there is in some endurance races. And I think that's absolutely true. But it does focus the mind that one little slip up with traffic and the whole show comes tumbling down for a particular entry.
I think we found, with our talk of the Japanese K cars, we have found a gap in the market here. Endurance racing with K cars. Matt Dean says the Mazda Demio, another classic from the era of great small cars and a favourite of Gran Turismo drivers starting off. Hello to Gamer Guy, joining us live from Marysville, Ohio, which isn't that where Honda have their plant over there? I think it is. Go Green Racing. The 110 being towed back at the moment, and the 110 under tow is I scroll through this screen over here, the Teichmann Racing KTM Crossbow. All right, so that might give us another slow zone. Hello to Big Train 45. Thank you for your kind words. And favourite cars, 289 Cobra Roadster and the original Corvette Grand Sport. Well, we've moved on to a completely different section of car culture there, and I'm not going to argue with that, Big Train, no doubt. Absolutely fantastic. Chris D joining us now, watching and listening. Sound and Vision, radio-show.co.uk. Good to have your company. We have full audio coverage across the weekend as well. And that Teichmann Racing KTM Crossbow is indeed being pushed back behind the barrier. And that is at Flansgarden. Very fast part of the circuit there, Peter.
Yeah, so the KTM Crossbow of Felix von der Laden, the number 110 car, had ground to a complete halt. Correct. Just over the blind crest at Exmüller, which is not the place you want to grind to a halt if there's anywhere here. So it's obviously got going again and then ground to another halt a couple of sectors later at Flansgarten, which is agonisingly close to the pits, but close but no cigar, unfortunately.
Here's a great question. Debate this on Twitter at RSL_studio and use the hashtag RSLN24. Stathis Coco says, why are there so few non-German GT3 marks here? Is it purely marketing? The race is very, very prestigious. It's an international event now. Is there a simple reason for it? I'm not sure there is, Stathis, but I'll take, listen, we've got another 2 hours tonight, and I'll take any of you listening or watching around the world, I'll take your submissions on this. There hasn't been a non-German mark winning here since the Vipers, the Zaxby Vipers, Bruce. We had some Fords before that, but even, I mean, the Vipers even then was a German team. But it was, up until relatively recently, it was very much a German race. It's got international prestige now. Bentley have been here, Aston Martin have been here in the top class, although not this year. Ferrari, sort of not really pushed it. There are plenty of other GT3 manufacturers, but it has been the Germans that have that have dominated here. Is there a simple reason for it, or is it just a very German race?
Well, I think if you're taking the top class, the SP9 class, of course, the German manufacturers that compete within that are desperately keen to win this race as one of the two 24-hour races, along with the Spa 24 Hours, which are their stamping grounds. But I'm still surprised, of course, Bentley went X-Works and GT3. Otherwise, I'm sure they'd have some cars here. Lamborghini are doing their best, but they've only got two cars in the race, the two Ferraris. But the real works engines are all German crews, because this race is just so important. We'd love to see other cars competing in GT3 and SP9, and I think in years to come we will get it. But just glancing back over the history of the 48 running to this race, every single car is German manufactured. You talked about the Fords, but of course they were manufactured in Germany. The Ford Caprice in 81, the Escorts before them, the Sierra Cosworth in 87. It's those Chrysler Vipers, 1999, 2001 and 2002. Since then, the closest we've got to a non-German car winning was, we had a Dodge Viper second in 2007, and we had a Ferrari Team Farnbach as recently as 2010. But it really is actually quite depressing reading if you're a manufacturer from any other country other than Germany. But you know what? Here's the challenge. Come and play, see if you can win.
I remember the year that the 911 flywheel hybrid ran here, Peter. I was trackside commentating, and there was a real big battle between that and who was it? Well, the Felbermeyer Farnbacher cars, but it was a Ferrari, and I couldn't decide what would be the biggest story if one of those two cars had won, whether it would be the hybrid winning or whether it would be the Ferrari winning. And the Ferrari, by the way, that I think I'm right in saying, had run in GTE specification the previous weekend at the Spa 6 hours. As it happened, neither of them won, which was bizarre. But it has been. I think Bruce and I talked about this on Midweek Motorsport. There are only 3 or 4 non-German entered teams, never mind the manufacturer, in the whole of the top class. And one of those is GPX, which is Glingenhaus.
Indeed, yes. And well, actually, for those who are fans of the prancing horse and are maybe looking a little glum with all these German manufacturers up the front, well, Luca Ludwig has struck back for Ferrari. He's actually gone 4th quickest in SP9 in his Ferrari 488, and less than a second off the ultimate pace of the number 6 Mercedes. Now, if you recognise that second name, folks, Ludwig, that is son of double Le Mans winner Klaus, who of course won Le Mans in 1979 with the Whittington brothers, who of course have it. Well, we could fill the rest of the evening with stories about those guys.
Probably best not to, because I'm not sure we've got the RSL lawyer on standby, to be honest. The 114 Teichmann, the orange and black KTM Crossbow. I've never professed to be any kind of automotive engineer, particularly not in the specialised areas of suspension geometry. But even I can tell you that the left rear suspension is not in good shape. I'm not even sure whether actually, I think the wheel nuts come off that on the left rear wheel. Yes, it has. So it's not suspension, it's a rear wheel nut that's gone astray on that car. It was sitting rather at a jaunty angle, but then on closer inspection, I can clearly see that the wheel nut was absent, and in fact the wheel has come adrift from that left rear now as it's being pulled back by the Mercedes out of the way at Flans Garden. Maurice GT8 says, there are 24-hour race with K cars, and he sent me a link, and I have retweeted it because you can sign me up for that right now. I need to find where that is. I'm right there? Well, yes, almost certainly. So there are K-Car 24-hour races. Stephen Lloyd saying, interesting conversation. Shane Bentley never got the Gen 3 car to the Nurburgring. Never say never. Jack Shalowski. Hello, Jack. Long time no speak. For this year in particular, I suggest the possibility of long quarantines in and out of Germany, coupled with maybe having a car shipped over, makes it very difficult for some people to run there. Yeah, you're absolutely right here as well. Pontiac, Michigan, Joe Ginsinger joining us from the automotive capital of the world. Mark Thomas is in Houston, Texas, loving the Foxtail Manta. And if you want to get in touch with us, please do, because we've got plenty of time to fill over the weekend. Peter Mackay, Bruce Jones joining me, John Hinder from the Global Broadcast Centre, with Peter Snowy Snowden, who has raced here, Envy, and Joe Bradley, who has done plenty of laps around here in virtual reality, which I suspect Peter has as well. They'll join us at the weekend for the race, and we will be 24 hours straight through our RS1 audio feed, which is all free with no blocks wherever you are in the world. We're getting to the bottom of a couple of video blocks on YouTube that may be put into place for the race. We'll try and get you some news on that. If you go to our Facebook area, it's Radio Show Limited Listeners Collective, and Eve, the responsible adult, is working that out with our colleagues at Nurburgring TV. Christian Cronjes in the BMW M6 GT3 out on the circuit, and for once, relatively empty track, and the headlights beginning to pick out the important areas as he goes across the bridge and up towards the little jump at Flugplatz, now heading quite steeply uphill actually as he carves his way through the Eiffel. Actually completely nonsense there, Hindhoff, the darkness showing me up. He was coming down Flansgarden towards the second carousel, my apologies. Now into Gallenkopf before he heads on to the long Dottinger Hole. What is that, 2.5 kilometres, something like that. Traffic ahead, got the flashes on, drags up behind though, still uses the hole in the air being made by the AMG number 9, which he goes past without too much problems down the long Dottinger Hole, and that would be the get speed. Janine Hill as was, Janine Schuffner now, Maury Krantz, Marcus Paltella, and Maxime Soule. I read somewhere, and I think it was Janos Wimpfen who sent this to me, thanks Janos, that Janine's husband John is on the list to go into space with NASA on one of the first customer flights, doing his training I think at the moment. Wish him all the best on that. And even though I'm absolutely petrified of heights, I envy that. Sorry Peter, go ahead.
So Cronje's quickest.
Oh really?
You could just watch those sectors going through. And of course that is excellent. A Yokohama tyre. Very good. A Yokohama shod BMW for Walkenhorst Motorsport, the team owned by Henry Walkenhorst, and yeah, very quick, goes 1.2 seconds quicker than anyone. So brilliant stuff from Christian Cronjes in that number 101 car from the former Spa 24-hour winner and former VLN champ back in 2012. It's one of the Lambos having a bit of a off-track excursion getting around a BMW.
Do you know, when I looked at that, I thought that was the Land Audi in that green and white colour, but absolutely well spotted by Peter. That was a Lamborghini. Bad news for the Cayman number 87. This is the sort of zebra coloured car at the front end of that machine, and it's the GTS SP4T. Just 3 drivers I've got on my list for that. Andreas Schultz, Ernst Tharin and Stefan Brenner. And that car's come into contact with the GT tyres, sponsored, black and yellow Golf GTI. And there's a wee bit of damage on the right front of that. Guys, we've really started something. Bruce, I think this is you and I's fault. We've started something with the K car conversation. Jonathan Main, who's a proud Welshman, says, I've got a Daihatsu Copeland in my garage, but it needs a bit of TLC. But honestly, if there was any kind of racing for K cars at the Nurburgring, I'd cage it and get it out.
Well, John, look how popular. I think it was last weekend. Was there a 24-hour race for Citroen C1s, like a modern iteration?
Yeah.
So, but what I think of this conversation as a bit of brain training ahead of the 24 hours, and certainly our listeners and viewers around the world have not disappointed. They've dug deep already, but that means they're going to be the sort of people capable of remembering the 500 drivers spread across 125 entries, and you do need to be, on your mettle, whether you're watching, listening, or indeed competing here. And I think it's a great little gambit to get the ball rolling. One little point I want to make, John, you said coming out of Galgenkop, I've just checked what the distance is from there, from that very point, through to the start-finish line. It's a whisker over 2 miles. It's almost precisely 2 miles, or 3.2 kilometres, of which, 95% is absolutely flat chat.
Yeah. It never ceases to amaze me. I've been driven there many times myself, albeit on either tourist laps or closed industry days, how late the GT3s brake when they come through the compression at the end of the Dottinger Höhe at Tiergarten and then up to the final chicane. They are well up the incline before they even think about braking. Now, all right, you've got the upward hill there to slow you down. And then they aim right at the edge of that piece of Armco on the left-hand side that's got the red markings on it, knowing that if they aim pretty much straight for it, they're going fast enough to drift past it. Differently wired, Peter, these guys, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, you can say that again, that's for sure. And notable performance tonight from Axel Jeffries in the Conrad Motorsport Lamborghini Huracan. So the Italians are fighting back here with that car up to 4th. But I feel in the next 20 minutes or so, I know they said this 20 minutes ago, but I feel in the next 20 minutes we're going to see a flurry of fast lap times. And also a certain Kate Estra Esquire has got on board the 911 Manti car, so stand back.
It's a very good point there, Peter, is a few incidents in the last 10 minutes or so, and I just think it's the less experienced drivers just not knowing where their braking points are until they've just driven past them, as they're just struggling to get used to racing from grey into black, from evening into night. And I think it tends to be the drivers with less experience in the sort of junior class cars, if you will, like the GT tyres Golf that are catching themselves out. But for the big guns, they do this almost, John, don't they, by muscle memory. For example, in their mind, they visualise the lap. This is the point at which, yes, here I am at that point, and they're turning in. They're already sort of pre-turned, as you do when you're sort of racing. If you really love your skiing, you don't just turn into a corner. You've already thought about it already. You're sensing and tensing and picking that point.
And so much. That's a magnificent point to make there, Bruce, because so much of this circuit, many racetracks actually, but because this is such a long track, so much of it is a sequence of corners, and that's how you learn it. You don't learn it as, this turn, then that corner, then the next turn, then the next corner. It has to be thought of as a whole, and that to me makes it's your favourite country road, the Nurburgring. That's how Klaus Graf described it to me many years ago. And he said, that's how you've got to treat it. It's your favourite country road, except there's nothing coming the other way, generally speaking. Something's gone horribly wrong. And you have to treat it like that and run. And in those days, he was saying that even in the race, they ran 85, 90% because you couldn't run any quicker. That's gone now. That's gone. When we were on track days, or we were doing industry pool days, or manufacturer days, and I was taking people around in Astons and such like, then there was maybe 20 cars out there, and therefore sometimes you didn't see another car. Therefore you were leaning on it a bit more. You didn't have to worry about what was over the rise, because you all had radios, and anybody who had a problem, you were going to find out about it. Now, all right, particularly when you've got people on board with you, you are not pushing it 100% nowhere near. But now what we see at the front of the field at GT3 level is what we heard from Klaus Bachler, what we heard from Adam Christodoulou, what we heard from Philippe Eng earlier on this week. It is your thumb comes off the pit lane speed limiter, you are 100% until your thumb goes back on 8 laps later in the race. Well, I think it was it Klaus? I think it was Klaus that said there's no room for even 95% anymore. It is a series of sprints separated by pit stops for fuel, tyres, and possibly a driver change. Extraordinary stuff. It really, really is. And we should celebrate the reliability, by the way, of these GT3 cars, based on road cars, let's not forget, the kind of reliability we get out of these, the kind of tolerances that these road car derived engines run to, your road car sitting outside right now, the kind of tolerances that they run to now, it would have been dreamt about 20 years ago in motor racing, at the highest level of motor racing. The kind of reliability that we get from even highly tuned road cars nowadays would have been dreams 15, 20 years ago at Le Mans, at here, the Nurburgring. And it's an extraordinary thing. It really is. And we should celebrate what motor racing does for us as road car drivers, particularly in terms of tyres. I mean, we've talked about that a lot, but tyres, EFI, electronic fuel injections, the control systems, the way they all talk together, marvellous. Greg Higgins, I'll come back in a sec. I want to throw this in, Peter, if you don't mind. Greg Higgins, questions that perhaps we're embarrassed to ask. Greg, we've all made a career out of asking embarrassing questions, so never a problem. At RSL_studio, hashtag RSLN24. How do the pit stops work, says Greg? It appears they need to do an extra lap of the GP circuit every time they come in. I do listen every year, but it's a shame to say that I've never really watched for a variety of reasons. Hello from Cork in the Emerald Isle, what my grandmother would still call, if she was alive, the Irish Free State. Greg, no silly questions. At this time of the week, that coned off area from the transition from the Nurburgring Nordschleife onto the Grand Prix circuit is there to make people do that extra lap of the Grand Prix circuit before they come in. Also, if you want, you can come out of the pits, you can do an installation lap and decide whether you go back onto the Nürburgring Nordschleife and either come into the pits or go back down the front straight again. That's why the cones are there. In the race, that will be gone. So you will enter the pit lane off the end of the run onto the Grand Prix circuit at what would have been Coca-Cola curve, as I still want to call it, but straight off the end of the Tiergarten and the final chicane. So no daft questions, Greg. Glad you asked that. Well, I'm sure I have to explain that again before the end. Sorry, Peter, go ahead. I was off on my little soapbox talking about various other things before we answered that question.
I think it was actually Bruce. Yes.
Yeah, no, the point I wanted to make, John, you were talking about the unbelievable reliability.
Yes.
In fact, I just want to throw in fact, we've got a new fastest time. Suddenly, Julian Andlau has put the Rutronic Racing number 3 Porsche top 8 minutes.
8 minutes 21.4 for Andlau.
Some of the top drivers are racing these cars all around the world, almost every weekend. Last weekend, they had the 6 hours at Port Ricard. Then you've got the ADAC GT Championship, the GT World Challenge Sprint Championships and around the world. And so these cars, they have to be strong. And their performance and reliability has just kept on improving. But these are cars that have worked super, super hard. And I think the formula really does work, because you look back at earlier runnings 30 years ago with the Nurburgring 24 hours, and obviously fewer cars finished than started, but sometimes only half of the field made it to the end. Now we're looking at far greater percentages that go the full 24 hours. So accolades all round.
Yeah. Gerismazos Zapatis. All this kit car talk reminds me of the conversations in the night hours of a 20. Yeah, we've started that a bit early. You're right, get up. That is... Listen, Bradley is going to be on during the night. Snowy's going to be on during the night. If we don't get the Bradley, this is how we won a Formula Libre race in a Formula Ford at Snetterton in the pouring rain. If we don't get that story again, we'll be very disappointed. But absolutely. Ian McCarthy says, nothing coming the other way on your country road, as described by Klaus Graf, but you do get an assortment of course vehicles in different way to any other track. Country roads mentality, but on steroids. Can't disagree with any of that, to be honest. Martin Finkelhock's behind the wheel of the Audi Sport Team Car Collection. Number 2 in 10th position at the moment for the Audi R8 LMS. He's in traffic at the moment, just going through Brunchen and heading up through the ice curve in the red and black Audi. And right in front, one of the Falcon Porsches. And again, I forgot to fire up the tracker, but I think that is the 44 car that's right ahead of him. I stand to be corrected on that. With if it is, it's Klaus Bachler at the wheel of that. And of course it isn't, is it? No, so it must be the other one. It's Thomas Preining at the wheel of the 33 Falcon. I had 2 to pick from, Peter, and ...
Well, I have to say, I was trying to... Of course, there is a couple of things that give away the difference, and that's the front caps of the mirrors and the front diaphragms. But, of course, we were looking at the back
of the car,
no use at all. So, yeah, we do apologise for our audio listeners. We aren't able to identify it. But, yes, you're right. Klaus Bachler driving that car. Marcus Winkelhock looking like on a... Well, he's certainly got a purple sector on this lap. And if Marcus was to win this weekend, he would equal the all-time record held by Timo Bernard, Romain Dumas, and I think a couple of others on 5 wins.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably Pedro Lamy, I would reckon, would be in that mix.
Pedro Lamy, absolutely.
Yes.
It's been... We've covered this race since 2007, and what a time for us to come on board and cover this race, because there's been new lap distances, people winning for the 5th time, Manthey winning 4 times in a row, Manthey coming back from a lap down and winning by 2 laps. Oh, yeah, I'll never forget that. We've had a really good time covering this race, and I have a suspicion that if the weather holds this year, we've had some interruptions as well. 7 and a bit hours delay. No, more than that, 9 hours delay.
9.5.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, wasn't it, with the rain?
Yeah, absolutely. But my goodness, we've had some stunning racing. And all of the things that we were talking about, Bruce, earlier on, about reliability, what that's led to, and you can't relate this 24-hour race to any other 24-hour race. Every 24-hour race has its own character, its own atmosphere. So, yes, there's a Daytona 24. Yes, there's a Nurburgring 24. Yes, there's a Dubai 24-hour. And, of course, there's Le Mans 24s and many more. But they all have their own character. But the one thing we can say, Bruce, that all the things we were talking about earlier about reliability has given us much closer racing. When I first went to Le Mans, if the winning margin was in single figures of laps, you thought you'd had a close race.
Absolutely. And I think that's why, okay, this year we got restricted number of spectators allowed onto the hallowed grounds. But back when I started coming to this event, where one of the whole features of it was to walk out in the countryside and see the castles that people had made. Some brought their own banks to assemble like a camp. Others just simply built them out of beer barrels, and they got larger and larger. But the racing wasn't as close, with as much depth. The top handful of cars, the top dozen cars, or maybe the top half dozen cars, would be racing tooth and nail. But if one of them fell, or failed, which inevitably happened, then your battle got really, really reduced.
Yes.
But the fact we've got so many full-time pro drivers, which is, I reckon, despite sort of the vagaries of the world economy over the past 20 years, the number of drivers outside America, which used to be the home of the pro driver, who are getting paid to go racing cars is at a record height. And therefore, the quality of these drivers means that the racing stays super safe, close at the top. One driver just looking at there, Patrick Niederhauser, a driver who's been on Audi's books for a handful of years. He's one of those drivers who could very easily take a win this year, but a real mixture at the top end. But it is the fact that racing will last from the start to the end, 24 hours, and we'll have more than a handful of cars in the top couple of laps. I think, barring disaster, that's what we can expect. And that certainly wasn't the tune even 25 years ago, where you could have a 2, 3, 4, 5 lap winning margin. It's so much closer now.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, in some ways, Bruce, we've got a generation of endurance fans who have become used to that. And if it isn't side by side in the last lap after 24 hours at the Nurburgring Nordschleife, you get a bit disappointed, which I kind of understand, because that's what they're used to. But the great thing about endurance racing, I always think, is that the story unfolds as you're watching it. And that's why, like watching test cricket, which I was trying to keep up with today with England versus New Zealand at Lords, you never know when the turning point of the race is going to happen. And that's why you've almost got to keep watching. It draws you in. Even when you think, oh, I really need to go to bed now, it kind of draws you in, and keeping up to date with it is actually quite important.
Yeah, and one of the real hard things, we've said it a million times, the lap is 25 kilometres long.
Yeah.
If you just pass pit in when suddenly the weather, as it has a habit of doing in the Eiffel Forest, becomes cataclysmic, you've got an awfully long way to go tiptoeing around, possibly aquaplaning on a circuit. The previous time you've been around that particular sequence of corners was dry. So you could be going beautifully for a dozen hours, do nothing wrong. Your pit stops are all bang on. Your setup is great. Your quartet of drivers is performing beautifully. And one little slip, and bang. You may not, but you talked earlier about coming back and winning by 2 laps despite going several laps down. Yeah. It is still possible, but it's the fact around the next corner, there's always something lurking. And here with that monster long lap around the Nordschleife, one little slip up can cost you hours of tip-top work.
Hours, absolutely. Right, Jonathan, thank you. Jonathan Main, thank you very much. Nothing better, he says, than the RSL studio chats and tangents in the dead of night at any 24-hour race. It's what we listen for. Love that it started early, possibly a bit early, but dial that back in and give you some news on what's going on. Because, Peter, we have a new fastest lap in qualifying.
That we do, yes. It's the Retronic Racing Porsche of Sven Muller on board that car. Although I think it was Julian Andlauer that set the time and did one little lap around the GP circuit and handed over to Muller. So yes, Retronic Porsche up the front. So in the moment we have Porsche from BMW, from Mercedes, from Porsche again. So very difficult, and of course there's an Audi and a Lamborghini there as well in the top 6, so everyone represented very well indeed. And of course not all of the top cars are running the Michelin tyre. The Yokohama Shod Walkenhorst BMW sitting second overall right now.
Good to see that variety at the top of the field. Lamborghini, a lot of people's favourites, and towards the great to see the Conrad name up there as well. Franz Conrad, real stalwart of endurance racing for very, very many years. His car sitting in, 7th position at the moment. Rutronic, Bruce, a name, a team that has a lot of well-known drivers in it. What about the team?
Well, you always have to keep an eye for teams competing in the various championships around the world, and Rutronic, HCB Rutronic, named HCB was Hans Christoph Behler, who's the founder, was a team that sort of seemed to come from nowhere. A couple of years ago, and went away with the title in the ADAC GT Masters Series with two drivers who are competing this weekend, Patrick Niederhauser and Kelvin van der Linde. Ironically, they're running for other teams this weekend, but it just goes to show that if you can get the right approach and the right drivers in your car, you can go and win titles. But 5 years ago, what was this team? We knew other teams at the top end of the field, Falcon Motorsports, Falcon Horse Motorsport, who are running third at the moment. They had come through and won the Spa 24 Hours, but Rutronic, watch out for them. They've only got the one car though, so they really can't afford any slip-ups there. But it's great to have variety, and good to see their silver Porsche right at the sharp end of the field by a margin of 0.6 of a second now, as Klaus Bachler's just banged in a very quick lap to go second fastest.
Sorry, it was Tobias Muller, not Sven Muller. I knew I would make that mistake.
It's all right. There's
Jorg as well. So.
Yes, and there are many Mullers. I'm not sure what the collective noun for Mullers are. A much of Mullers, perhaps. Thomas Much of Mullers, but perhaps. Porsche's first and second now with Rutronic and Falcon, with a new best time for Klaus Bachler in the Falcon Motorsports, number 44. Last time around 0.6 of a second, over 8.5 minutes, near enough. 8:22.0 against 8:21.4. Walkenhorst still sitting in third. And Peter, we've been talking about the tyre battles, and how good is it to see the different tyre manufacturers at the sharp end of the field?
Absolutely fantastic. 3 different tyre manufacturers, Falcon, Yokohama and Michelin, all in the top 3, and that is what we want to see. Now, that gives us an impression of what we can see in the dry, although I have a suspicion, and I don't want to pour cold water on what is a tantalising prospect. If the rain comes, the Michelin man will smile.
It seems to be. Well, yes, it seems to be. But it was quite a while before Falcon in the US won a dry race when they were competing. They know how to build wet weather tyres as well. And this is such an important race that there will be a bit of jiggery and, if you will, Bruce, pokery going on with what's going on with the tyres. The regulations state quite categorically that a tyre that you make available to your supplied teams has to be available to everybody else. So I'm not suggesting that there is anything going on there, but you know that the tyre manufacturers are putting as much effort into this as the automotive manufacturers are.
Absolutely. The shop window is established, it's here, it's now, and also I think the prestige of winning a 24-hour race on a circuit that A, is as difficult as it is, and B, it seems to be struck by many seasons worth of weather in a lot of the runnings of the day and night special. You get added prestige. Your tyres are quick, but they're brilliant in all circumstances. That's what you want to put across as your message, and that's why the like of Falcon Motorsports have run teams here for years. They've got the ultimate testing grounds. They have to go out and do it and make it work, but that is indeed one of the real draws of this fabulous event.
I'm informed by Yoda's uncle that, of course, the collective noun for Mullers is a corner of Mullers. Oh, very good. Very good. Very good indeed. Wickerbill got in there as well. Bunch of Mullers. It's a corner or a multi-pack. Very good indeed. See, that's what we're working with. You, the collective, are working with us here on the Radio Show Limited network of audio and visual channels right across the weekend, all of the N24. We've got ELMS as well, if you feel the need in the breaks to go and watch some shorter circuit racing from Ricard. It'll be Johnny Palmer and Graham Goodwin in the RSL commentary booth for that one this weekend. And weather forecast for that is very interesting as well down at Ricard, circuit that is not too far away from the south coast of France. An hour and 21 minutes to go, and a new second place time. Bruce Jones.
It's a Ferrari fans. Get on your horse and prance. The number 22 car, WTM, powered by Phoenix, and it's Daniel Kalvitz. I singled him out before this event as the star in that car, but he's just 0.179 of a second down on the Rutronic Porsche now, so he laps in a very, very cracking pace. And we've seen that, John, haven't we? Just chipping away, moved into the top 6 with Ludwig's not in that car, but just going better and better. But Kalvitz, he is very quick in whatever he drives, and just goes and proves it. So there's another team that you've got Rutronic. You wouldn't have picked them as a car that's necessary, a team that would be right at the top, or WTM powered by Phoenix. But there they are, first and second. Yeah,
that is very impressive indeed for that Ferrari splitting the two Porsches.
In fact, John, if I may just come back, I was about to suggest that Luca Ludwig was in that car. Of course, he's in the Octane 126 car, but that was 6th when we last saw it. It's now moved down to 10th, but 2 Ferraris in the top 10. That's all they could ask for at this point, and I think they had quite a smile with an hour and 20 remaining in this second qualifying session.
Peter, what's your impressions of this first session into the darkness tonight, just after 10 o'clock, 10 past 10, Nurburgring? It's dark on the Grand Prix circuit, it's darker still, and we're still not in a full dark at the moment. What are your impressions of seeing full metal racing on the Nordschleife?
It's a pinch yourself moment, really, to be quite honest with you. It's this is motorsport at its absolute first-class, world-class level, and isn't it wonderful that such an incredibly unique event is allowed to continue in these, we talk about, things getting, getting too dangerous and things like that. But you look at here at the Nürburgring, you look at the effort that the organisers and the marshals put in to make sure that this event is as safe as it can be. And you look at I tell you what, if you ever see a road in the UK clogged up because of an accident, get the Nürburgring marshals on the case. They'll clear it up in no time. It's just incredible. And what's amazing is that I remember speaking to Kevin Escher about this, the lap record holder here at the Nürburgring in the NLS. And he said to me, he says, even it might be a Renault Clio or a BMW 3 Series, he says, but he says the driver inside will be top class. Not just anybody gets let out on the Nürburgring. You've got to earn your stripes, as they say.
Well, Bruce, what we were seeing in the preview on Midway Motorsport on Wednesday, that's available for download or listen on demand, by the way, at radio-show.co.uk. Look at the Hyundai drivers in the what is effectively a TCR class. Mark Bessing's in there, and he's been right at the very sharp end of this race in past years.
Absolutely, he has, John. But again, that's why we have 122 cars at a set time. You've got to look the whole way down the entry list. We've got former winners like Volker Strycek still out there in that Opel Manta, but the experience isn't only, and the speed isn't only in the SP9, the top class for FIA GT3 cars. There are star drivers dotted down, and you know what? Manufacturers like Hyundai, what do they want? They want speed, of course, but they want experience because they want their car to perform to its very best in all the vagaries you get here on the Nürburgring Nordschleife. So Basseng, one of those drivers you have to go looking for down the order, and he'll do that gold standard job that he's been doing for 2 decades.
Got a news, and I'm indebted to Nikolai B, who's tweeted us at RSL Studio using the hashtag RSLN24. Respect and discipline here is so important, and already getting news of a 5-place grid penalty for failing to respect flags out on the Nordschleife. That is the number 41 AMG there. Also the number 172, and that has been moved to the back of its starting group. That's the Auto House Honda Civic TCR. Moved to the back of its starting group for a flag and the speeding offence. Those stewards' decisions coming through. And
just want to correct one thing there, John. Actually, it's car number 40. 41 doesn't exist, but it's Kenneth Heyer at the middle. The 10Q Racing Team, the black and gold Mercedes. No, it's written as 41 on the official bulletin. We go with that, but I'll just add a little bit of top spin and make a car 40.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Bruce. I skimmed through my entry list and couldn't see it, and I thought it might have been a change to that. In the pit lane at the moment is a very pretty GT silver Porsche, which is getting a brake change, and I think that was the Rudtronic car that at the moment is sitting at the top of the standings, Peter.
Yeah, correct. It's in the pits,
Oh,
in the
sorry,
garage.
Bruce. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely number 3. And that's driven by Julian Andlauer, who set the time, Romain Dumas, Tobias Muller, and Lawrence Vantor. Not a bad lineup there. Certainly Tobias Muller will be hoping his massive stars alongside him can propel him up to the front. But right now they are at the front, albeit with the brake change. But John, we talked about how this session, 3 hours, they'd already had an hour and a half earlier in the day. It's going through the process, going through the procedure, making sure any novice here, not that there are many novices at the top end, get their night laps in.
Well, and actually that is a question that we often get asked. How do you get to race at the Nurburgring? I'd love to do it. It doesn't matter who you are. You could have Lewis Hamilton if he decided he wanted to come here. He can't walk into this race. He can't even walk into a Nurburgring Längstrecke Series race, because even if you've got a super license from the FIA in Formula One, if you are a Daytona 500 winner, a Rolex 24 winner, it doesn't matter. You have got to go through the protocol of getting your permit, your Nürburgring permit. There was a really great programme on Sky Sports F1 where Martin Brundle went through the whole process of doing it and ended up in the race. To start with, you've got to use cars of a certain horsepower, and then if you want to step up, you've got to do a certain amount of laps before you're allowed into the Nürburgring 24, which is why we always see a very packed set of grids in the early NLS races. Drivers who are getting their permits. I'm desperately annoyed with myself. I got an opportunity a few years ago to go and do it, and for a variety of reasons, mostly involved with actually having work to do, I never got to do it, and it's one of the things I really kick myself about. And again, you know, I'm an international C, FIA holder, FIA license holder, which means I can race pretty much anywhere in the world, but not as of right at the Nürburgring. And I'm honest with you, I think that's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. And we have seen permits taken away from drivers during the race, Bruce. We've seen that happen down through the years where they have not respected slow zones, flags, etc., and they're politely told, get back in the car again, and if you want to come back, you're going to have to re-qualify for your permit. And I think here more than anywhere else in the world, that has to be right, doesn't it?
I was going to say 2 words and they rhyme. Quite right.
Yes.
And in fact, as it's gone from evening into now full darkness on the Nordschleife, there are still a few drivers, maybe because their cars are easy to pick out because they're bright colours, that are really in some of the production classes that are going to have to learn and be told a little bit more and have it stressed to them about how they keep out of the way. It's not an easy thing. If you're at a production class car and you've got a GT3 car racing in the SB9 class at top coming up at you out of the darkness, you can probably panic a little bit, but it's about, as we know, in multi-class racing, consistency of line and not altering your position more than you can get away with. And so a polite word in the air saying, okay, we've looked at that TV footage of you, what you did wrong there was you went one way, then you went the other. Yeah. But it is a learning process, but certainly maybe some of it became a little more plain with the flash of the headlights, the flare of the headlights coming off the tail end of the slower car. But certainly we've seen a few moments of evasion. We saw one earlier from Nick Yeloli. I'm trying to think who else we saw, but almost all the top drivers would have had a scare or a moment or two in which they've had to adapt their line. So let's get consistency of line, but the officials are very, very good at letting a driver know. It's not anything they've done wrong, but they could have done it better, and that's how sports coaching should be. I
think that should be the same. We talk about it here at the Nürburgring because of the unique nature of the Nordschleife. I think that should be applied everywhere. I had a very long and interesting conversation with Emmanuel Pirot when he was first appointed to be one of the Formula One stewards, and he was talking to me about Code 60s. I think it might have even been before Formula One adopted their version of Code 60, which is virtual safety car. And he was asking me about how it worked and why I thought it was good or bad or indifferent, etc. And at the end of this huge conversation we had about slowing people down, he said, of course, if drivers respected waved yellow flags, we wouldn't have to do all this. And I looked at him and he went, yeah, I know, poacher turned gamekeeper. He was absolutely right. Talking about near misses, Peter, Frank Stippler, Stippy. My goodness, his eyes might have opened a little bit wider recently.
Well, we know that Frank Stippler is a four-time winner. He is a real king of cam. He's won 3 times in the last decade in this event, one of the very best out there, and very, very nearly ended up in the back of the GT Tyre ST8 class Audi with now I'm just trying to find who's on board that car right now. That's the Pippa Mann and Christina Nielsen car. I'm trying to find on the timing screen where they are right now, the 53 car.
I'll have a scan.
But a very close one indeed.
Yeah.
I think it was at Clostertal, which is about as quick a point as you can have such a moment.
Yeah, and it's quick through there. Not a lot of, well, there's very few places on the outer reaches of the circuit where there's room to have those kind of incidents. I'm indebted to Joe Bradley as well. Try not to faint yourself down when you're talking, Heindel. We were talking about the Retronic Racing Porsche in the pits, the number 3 car, which is at the top of the timings at the moment, having improved to an 8:21.4 this evening. They were changing brake discs, but as Joe, who has some experience, some very good experience of running teams in both sprint and endurance races down through the years, points out, they probably weren't changing those brakes because of where they would have been bedding in and matching a new set of discs to a new set of pads. So do a couple of laps and then take them off, put those away at the one side and go, we know we're going to have to change discs and pads, rotors and pads during the race. That will be the first set of pads that we put on with that new disc, that new set of discs at some stage in the race. Augusta Farfus getting a bit frustrated at the moment as he goes under the Bilstein Bridge towards the end of the lap. He's massively on the flash button, rather overusing it, I would say, Augusto. So he dives down the inside of the number 11 Audi, currently in the hands of Phoenix Racing GmbH car, is in the hands of who? Kim Louis Schramm. Yes, thank you, Bruce, for I'm consulting various different screens as I'm trying. I would like to say that I know the entry list off by heart, but only Bruce Jones will be able to do that by the end of the weekend.
Yeah, not yet, man.
I'll still never forget that year at the Hankook 24 Hours of Dubai, when we were sitting ready to go to the airport in the evening and you were quizzing us all on the 94 car field that had been running, and you knew it off by heart. It was just extraordinary. I have no clue how you do that, Mr. Jones.
If only I'd done that academically. Never mind. Moving along.
Yes, there are so many of us who can say that. Why can I remember all of the words to that 1970 song, but I can't remember why I've cooked in the kitchen? It's, yep. Absolutely.
My dad had a slightly sterner version of it. He says, if you spent as much time in your school books as reading an Autosport magazine, you'd be dangerous, Peter.
Yeah. Yes, but look, you're following your dream, mate. That's the, you know what? We've all had to make those decisions down through the years and turn our hobbies into what we do. And there's in fairness, there will be a lot of people listening and watching right now who would give important parts of their anatomy, probably without any form of anaesthetic, to do what we do, travelling in the old days around the world, but, you know, talking about motor racing and getting excited about it. And we are in a very fortunate situation. And when you make that jump, the thing that I found, and Bruce, you'll have done this as well, you have to be so careful about still having some kind of business head and working out how you're going to pay the bills when your heart says, oh no, I want to do that. I absolutely want to go to that event. Hang on, there's no money in it. But I really want to go to that event. And it's really difficult, isn't it? When your passion becomes what pays your bills, and there's a trade-off that still has to happen there.
Absolutely, John. You have to have a business head, or you'll be out of the story. But the big problem, of course, same for teams, same for drivers, same for the media. You can be promised all sorts of things, and at the 11th hour they don't happen, and suddenly you've got a great big gap in your year because you're trying to plot as many working weekends as you can get in the championships you like to cover. But for me, an awful lot of people who still go on that ever-increasing global jaunt following the World Formula One Championship, how they make those bills pay, I do not know. They're doing it because that's what they do. But I think if they started afresh, their accountant would say, what are you doing? 16 races when 12 used to be in Europe and you're based in Europe. Yes, you can do that. But when it's suddenly 23 races, of which the vast majority are now flyaways for the European teams, etc., etc. Not trying to be European-centric, it's just how it was. The story is so totally different, and so it's a hard game. You have to have a bit of guesswork as well.
So isn't it great when people like Jim Glickenhaus turn up, new on the scene, and decide that he wants to go motor racing and he wants to put a car with his own name on it at Le Mans, and he, at this very venue, 5-6 years ago when we first encountered Jim, resplendent, by the way, the Glickenhaus team in a very Leighton House March, sort of green, blue, Miami blue teamwear this year. He said, look, I understand that I'm going to have to put a lot of money into this, and it for me, I want to do it because I want to do it. Is it a business? I'll make it a business eventually. But right now, I want to go motor racing, and that's interesting. That it still elicits, Bruce, that much passion from people. He's making it into a business now, but it's still. I'm guessing it's still a long way from washing its face.
Absolutely, John. But he went in with his eyes open. So many people go in with their eyes closed and they might be lucky, but most of them come to a sticky end financially. But he had a fair amount of financial clout, but it's the focus that Jim applies that's made it all really work. He's also not expecting to turn it around in a handful of years. It's a long-term project, or many long-term projects in his case, but full of admiration for what Jim and the gang are doing. But you've got to go in, of course, with enthusiasm and passion, but you've got to be realistic, or it's just going to come to an end that you could take years to try and dig yourself out of.
You're listening to live coverage of the second qualifying session of the 2021 Total ADAC 24 Hours of the Nurburgring. We're coming down to the last hour of Thursday's qualifying session in what approaches full darkness now, and coming on at 10:30 here in the Eifel. Sunset officially on race night on Saturday is 21:38, so just around 20 minutes before 10. Still the last vestiges of light in the sky, reflected from a bit of low cloud. It's actually a beautiful evening, and the weather forecasts, which were somewhat gloomy and sceptical, have not yet come to pass. Severe weather warning for this area of Germany today, Thursday. That has not yet come to pass. There is a bit of a low pressure area gathering over Central Europe, which may change the weather over the weekend. But as yet, we've been relatively lucky, and we're getting a lot of laps in. And not, dare I say this, let me find something to touch wood on, that we've not seen anybody major contact with either another car. Major contact with another car. We saw one of the Cayman and the TCR Golf GTI earlier on with a little bit of bodywork rubbing. but nobody making major contact with another car, no car making major contact with the barriers, which is very good news.
Little description here, John, on the Twitter feed from Mark Thomas. Nothing like going through Brunchen at night, correct?
Correct.
My first time I thought there was a big accident going on, but it was just disco lights and smoke from the barbecues of the fantastic German fans. Doesn't that encapsulate what
Absolutely
it's all about?
Right. Absolutely right. Love it. Love it to bits. There is a special place here for everybody. And when things get back to what approach normal, if you're a sports car, endurance fan, an automotive fan, motorsport fan, if you're watching and listening to us now here on the RSL network of audio and video channels around the world, to Peter Mackay, Bruce Jones and me, John Hindorf, and you haven't been to the Nurburgring, there is a gap in your motorsport knowledge, CV, career, whatever. A lap of the Nürburgring Nordschleife in your own road car, even at moderate speeds, will change your view of this track forever, because trust me, it's way narrower than it even looks on anything that you're watching on the TV, on videos, whatever, and it's way quicker as well. And until you've done 20 laps or so and you can feel yourself knowing what's coming up next, it's an extraordinary place. And having to react to a racing track instead of knowing what's going on is something that takes a long time to get used to. And the racing here, the atmosphere here, the way that it totally takes over this region of Germany, in the way that Le Mans takes over Department 72 in France, it's something quite extraordinary. And yet, with an hour to go, Peter, in what is now close to full darkness, we are still seeing improvements in times, including at the very top of the timing screen.
Yes, we've got Augusto Farfus, winner of the 2020 Rolex 24 for BMW Junior team. He's very much he's the wise owl in that team. He's got 3 juniors under his wing for this race, but Augusto's gone quickest with an 8-minute 21.055. So very impressive from the BMW stalwart as well. In fact, I don't know if you guys, have you ever seen the video of Augusto Farfus taking his lovely wife around the Nürburgring and screaming her at him, and all he can do is giggle and laugh. I don't know if he's able to live that one down at home yet.
Someone taking their partner, Riccardo Patrese, with his lovely wife, who I think she last smiled when she left the pit lane, and it got worse and worse. She was beating the dashboard. It was phenomenal. I know, just wonderful, elegant smile. So he's on an afternoon drive, but his wife clearly saw that his day job was a little more fearsome than she reckoned on.
A lot of, I think, a little bit too much flashing from Augusto Farfus. You wouldn't be allowed to do that in Le Mans. There's a finite amount of flashes you're allowed to use, but he was on a very, very fast lap. Wicket Bill, perhaps unkindly, you be the judge, says, I wonder if you add up all the times the headlights have been flashed on the BMWs tonight, it would outweigh the number of times an indicator light has been used since BMW was formed. Harsh, I think.
Same stock.
Yeah, same stock. Yes, same stock, different protocol. Very good, Peter. Very good. Ian McCarthy noticing that as well. And Josh Barrett's with us tonight as well. Hello, Josh. Literally, as I was talking about how things had been close, there was nearly an accident as we were talking. I brushed past that because it didn't happen. So my pronouncement of cars not coming into contact with each other was still correct. It was factually correct. Philip Eng on a quick one as well, coming to the end of the lap in the defending champion Rover Racing BMW. BM's not having the best of the early part of the season on the Nordschleife Championships. It's across the line, 6 seconds down, 8 to 27 on that lap around, and that won't move them up from 19th position in that BMW.
A lot of traffic for Philippe there. I think he was on the headlight flasher more than he was off it there. And yeah, couldn't. I mean, to be 6 seconds off the very fastest time with that amount of traffic clearly shows you that the number one car, the defending champions for Rover Oil, they're nothing wrong with their speed.
I do think it's interesting, and your reaction and comments on this, that we see the 4-hour Nurburgring length striker races and indeed the 6-hour pre-event to this over the months leading up to the Total ADAC Nurburgring 24 hours, and we look at that and we've seen how well Porsche have done, and yet when it comes to this race, Bruce, it really is pretty much a clean sheet. I know there's been balance of performance, I know it's all been looked at. Porsche put their cards on the table early and weren't frightened to do that. As we come here, it's BMW, Porsche, Ferrari, Porsche, BMW, then 3 more Porsches, Mercedes, Audi, Lamborghini in the top dozen, Ferrari again. And what we're talking about here, yes, we're already into the teams, but we're talking about 3-4 seconds in a lap that's 8.5 minutes long. This is nothing. This is nothing here at all, is it?
No, entirely. It is super close, as we'd expect. Yeah, have people held their cars close to their chests? I'm never quite sure. I always feel that's more at Le Mans you see that than here. But this is the early jousting. We've got the top 30 shootout tomorrow evening. That is when we really start to see the true picture. This session is, set a decent time, but it's more about bedding in the brakes, getting the drivers all through their runs. And though we've had Philippe Eng and fellow BMW racer Augusto Farfus flashing their lights like mad, they just want to put one decent lap in. But the rest of this session, the 3 hours, is just about settling everything down, getting those laps on the board. But tomorrow, in the top 30 shootout, it's no holds barred. I cannot wait.
And they will be going out one at a time. GT tyres, BMW with right rear suspension damage. Now, the good news, if there can be good news when you've got damage, is that car is still on the Grand Prix circuit. So should be able to limp back and take the back way into the pit lane, which is still available at this stage of the evening. Proper dark now, isn't it? As what are we looking at? 10:30, 25 minutes to 11 local time. The lights in the paddock and on the front straight just giving a little bit of assistance to the drivers on the BMW grandstands and the Mercedes Arena grandstands on drivers left as you head across the start-finish line. Out on the track, the BMW i30 NTCR from Hyundai Motorsport. Jean-Carl Vernet, one of the big name drivers in the 831 on the Dottinger, just goes under the lit Audi, I was going to say bridge, but it's an Audi sign, isn't it, over the top at the start of the Dottinger. Not noticed that being illuminated before, not self-illuminated at least. I'll stand to be corrected on that. Car at max revs coming towards what is a bridge, the Bilstein Bridge. Welcome home, it says on the driver's side of that this year. You basically just look through the corner there and barely move your hands on the steering wheel. Oh my goodness, how late is Jean-Carl Vernet braked at the end of the lap, takes the big curb on the right-hand side at the final chicane. Back onto the start-finish line with all the cones on the right-hand side and down to finish a lap in the number 831. That car at the moment, I'll find the right mouse. It is leading the fastest. Yes, thank you, Bruce.
It's a Hyundai 1.2, the i30N we've seen with Vernet fastest, the Elantra N with Manuel Lauck, German racer, second fastest. In fact, Lauck has just entered the pit lane. A lot of cars in the pits at the moment.
Hyundai take this very seriously, this race. When they launched the fastback version of the i30 as a road car, it was sitting in a what looked like a big display. No, it was a big display box, but it looked like somebody had bought a model car, and it was just a little bit closer to you than you thought. It's a magnificent piece of marketing, and they've really used this race to good effect to develop this circuit to develop their N-branded cars to their sportier versions. And in fact, they've got a new sporty version of their SUV crossover coming into the UK about now, actually. I'm going to have a go of one of those and see what it's like. It's an interesting concept. How will it stack up against things like the Alfa Stelvio and the Porsche Macan, which are generally thought to be the best in their class for that type of vehicle? Well, the N-Kona is on its way, and we'll give that a go. But those little 2-litre 4 cylinders pushing out the sharp end of 300 horsepower in road trim, World Rally Championship, TCR, and here at the Nurburgring, Hyundai taking this very seriously indeed. Dennis Olsen's behind the wheel of Frickadelli number 31 at the moment. They are screaming past some of the other classes as they head up through Schwalbenschwanz to the top of the hill before dropping down into the foxhole. So quick through here. Got to be brave if you start taking anything other than the very edges of the curbs. Got a BMW ahead of him, and he's on the flasher as well. Dennis, that is, as they head up. Now, as you slow down towards the end, it's down a gear, and you can take some of the curbs in Adenauer Forest. And again, on the flashes, the BMW, Pete, has got a real strobe effect on their headlights, and the refresh rate on that probably means that their driver doesn't lose visibility. I understand that, but I can't believe that isn't off-putting for the cars they've come up against.
Oh, it certainly will be off-putting. I really hope that. We talk all the time about transfer from race to road. I really hope that doesn't make it onto the road cars, that's for sure. But I think that's maybe a Nürburgring special. Yeah, that's got to be I mean, you hear of the GT drivers at Le Mans complaining about the prototypes and their Blackpool illuminations on wheels, but yeah, it just shows you that if you want to compete here at the Nürburgring, that's just something you've got to put up with, because I don't think any of these drivers are going to, they're going to stop anytime soon. I mean, Dennis Olsen also flashing the lights of the Frickadelli Porsche a lot, but absolutely extraordinary the pace of these SP9 cars and carving through the traffic with just such precision. It's extraordinary to witness, and even just to listen to the onboard of this screaming flat six in the back of this Frickadelli car.
Is there a better sound in the world than a flat six Porsche motor? The GTE, the GT Le Mans cars squeezed out to just a tad under 4.2, but there's no further for that engine to go. These cars sitting at 4 litres, of course, and trust me, I've seen the gap between the liners in the 4.2. It's not another millimetre. It's something like 4,189 in the GTE, the GT Le Mans cars, and that's it. Talking to the Porsche engine guys, there literally is no further to go. Philip Eng's back out again in last year's winning BMW. Potentially not exactly the same car, of course, but it carries the number 1. Heading down towards the first corner now, and the Mercedes Arena, diving past one of the Cup class Porsches there as he goes into the shorter version of turns 1 and 2 that don't use the full right and then sweeping through the 2 left-handers, because that's being used as paddock area for some of the support races. And we have got again the wonderful young timer race, 3 hours on Friday. Now we're not covering that, but we're going to be watching it. It is available on the event website and YouTube pages with Patrick Simon and our German colleagues looking after that. Absolutely worth a watch on that. Absolutely. It's one of the things that I make sure I'm trackside for every time we come to the Nürburgring. Time's still improving down through the timing screen, Bruce. There's still some greens coming in last time around. So the old thing of drivers, and they've told me this before, and I find this a bit scary, but Philippe Eng improved last time before he pitted. Oh, I find it easier when it's dark. There are less distractions. All I can see is the track. I mean, I like the logic of it, but my goodness me, you've got to have confidence in yourself and your car to go the quickest of the weekend in the darkness hours.
It's a little sort of bon mot that they hang on to. If they believe it, that's fine. But again, they are rather different specimens to, I'm afraid, those of us who commentate about it. But I sort of get it. When you've got that half light or quarter light, it's going down from half light. It is tricky, but when it's fully dark, it's easier again. But of course, don't forget, when you're in low light and you're not in a part of the circuit that's looking west, when the sun is, when the light is fading, the real pockets of darkness. Of course, we've got the bright bomb blast when you come down the start-finish straight, but some of the twisting sections out after Ex-Müller, again after Klostertal, it's so dark that it is actually better when you've got full darkness and your lights are really bouncing back, almost off the dark, if you will.
Hello to William McDonald, who Maurice is teaching the European way of endurance racing. He's an American in Germany at the moment, described by Maurice as in shock but loving it. Yes, excellent stuff. There is that element of the Nurburgring Nordschleife. I know I've told this story before, but it's worth saying again. Years ago when I first went over, or when I was over doing some IMSA races and we were talking about tracks, and somebody saying, if you could only race one track ever, where would it be? And I said, the Nurburgring Nordschleife. I don't think there's a perfect lap out there. And they said, yeah, no, but I mean a real track, not a one on a video game. No, but the Nurburgring is a real track. It can't possibly be. And I had to explain to this person, and I'm sure they were not alone in thinking this, that it was actually real and not some product of a tortured imagination of a programmer. Then again, I had the same conversation about Colin McRae Rally with somebody when somebody was talking about Colin McRae Rally as a video game, and this actually speaks to how much motorsport owes to console gaming and gaming generally. When somebody was talking about Colin McRae Rally and joined, I said, oh yeah, you know, I've interviewed Colin many times, Wales Rally GB and blah blah blah. What, you mean Colin McRae's a real person? Yes. Honestly, he is.
Drove like a superhero.
Well,
I was going to say, in the flesh, you looked at real life videos and they didn't look real at all.
No, they didn't. Everything was
so outrageous.
Speeded up. Absolutely. But that speaks, Peter, doesn't it, to, particularly in the last, 15 years maybe, of how races like the Nurburgring, how various parts of motorsport have been reaching a new audience, a different audience, via esports. I think the Sports Car GT, which was the first, which was the first sim type of endurance racing that I did, and that was before it was called esports. But what's happened in the last 10, 15 years, and particularly over the last 3 years, has been extraordinary in terms of how that side of motorsport, and I say motorsport because it is real racing.
Yeah,
tracks aren't real. The cars may not be real, but the racing and the talent and the dedication is. It's been extraordinary, hasn't it?
It certainly is, and I think we're immensely lucky that in every entertainment and sporting industry took an enormous, unprecedented hit at the beginning of last year when the pandemic kicked off, and we've been really. Racing is actually the only sport that can be so close to the virtual world. You know, if you're playing FIFA football, you're moving your thumbs around. Now, last time I checked, you're not allowed to use your thumbs in football. And even if it's like MotoGP game, for example, again, you have to use a handheld. Yeah, so, but with sim racing, you've got a wheel, you've got pedals, you change gear with the paddles if you want, or you can even have a and also the software and the hardware is just mind-blowing that you can have something like that in your own home over the world. And it's amazing how it brings a racing community. It's a new level of club motorsport, I find. It's all about accessibility and participation is at the root of it.
And does it matter, Peter, in your mind, whether people transfer in? I mean, there have been plenty of things, and we were in right at the beginning of GT Academy, Darren Cox's extraordinary program with Nissan and Gran Turismo, right at the beginning to bring people from armchair to arnage, as was the phrase that we coined on that one. But does it matter if they don't then go on to race? Because it's surely it is all about more knowledge, more appreciation, more interest in full metal racing, as much as it is getting people to go and do track days or get their race licenses.
Well, that's a very interesting debate, actually, because I've spoken to a number of the top sim racers, which I can tell you put enormous amount of time into their preparation. You're talking 8, 9, 10 hours a day, and if you're not putting that in, you're nowhere. And so it's a day behind a screen all day, every day. However, having spoken to a couple of the really top sim racers who race in the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super, for example, there's a 200,000 prize pot. So there's a lot of drivers. I was speaking to one particular, who I won't name, who was saying, I can put in the same amount of time and I can race for prize money and do it professionally, or I can empty my savings account on one season of very entry-level motorsport.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to argue with that. I think where it comes in, to your point about the person who thought Nurburgring was a fictional circuit, I mean, if you you landed from an alien planet and went around it, you wouldn't believe that it was real. So I think if it gives people an appreciation and an understanding, I think at the very, very, very top level, I think the absolute experts will stay within the virtual world. I firmly believe that, for a variety of reasons. But I think in the layer, you've now got nearly 200,000 members on iRacing, for example.
Yeah.
Now, you don't need to get an enormous percentage of them, and all of a sudden you've got a whole new level of fan base.
And people like Bruce that we've talked about the NLS over the Sam Drogan. He's been in the NLS. He's now, I know he did some real world motorsport before he concentrated on esports, but he has since come back in the real world and raced in NLS. Augustin Kino, who's outstanding in the virtual world. He's done a variety of full metal racing, so there is both ways. Spengler and Philip Eng, BMW drivers, take esports very seriously.
Well, they did. In fact, the BMW PR program got right behind it and treated it when there wasn't full metal racing happening like the real thing. They handled it in exactly the same way. Of course, you've got the class of drivers who, the type of drivers like Sami Matti-Trogan, already on the books with some of the Formula One teams for their sim work. But it was also engineers crossing over the other way, crossing into sim racing to keep themselves sharp. And you know what? A lot of them who did that found they were really surprised, not just how similar it was, but how they still learn and stretch their capabilities at a time when there was no racing happening out on the circuits themselves. So it really surprised me. Not that it grew, but just by the ability. And that was about a year ago, and it's moved on leaps and bounds since then, John.
Dries van Ter followed, think, the Huber Motorsport number 23 Porsche down through the top of the foxhole, and that car getting out of shape and on the curbs. Dries keeping his foot in and going through.
Actually, Lawrence, actually.
Excuse me, was it?
Yeah, took the drive. Obviously, Tristan Vidas had it to start with, and then Lawrence slotted in, because the one thing he doesn't want his brother to do is win the race. He wants to win it. So Lawrence has won here before, but, a little bit of internecine rivalry always just adds to the spice. Now, John, you were talking about how people really do need to go through their checklist of races they have to attend in their lives. And I think you could be fairly safe that the Nurburgring 24 Hours should be on that list. but will be around for years to come. But I remember being told back in the early 90s, this is the final year. This was one of many final years for the Rouen-les-Essarts circuit. And I decided to go over for the weekend and try and catch it at the last asking. Of course, I did that in about 1992. What a circuit, dropping downhill. I always remember a fantastic shot of Fangio sideways in his Mercedes at the Virage des Six Frères on the way down the slope. By the time I got there, it had a chicane instead of that wonderful, fearsome right-hander with this enormous earth bank sort of right in front of the drivers' faces as they went into that turn. And then, of course, I came back, and I think the circuit ran for at least another 6 years in some form or other. But you do need to have a wish list. You do need to start picking them off.
Agreed. And actually, that track, you can still walk round most of that circuit. Not all of it. Some of it's been lost to the new dual carriageway at Rouen-les-Arts. But they did, bizarrely, they knocked down the old tribunes and the pit lane complex quite a few years ago now. And then bizarrely, out of nowhere, they tarmacked over the Nouvelle Monde hairpin, which was the cobbled hairpin at the bottom of the hill. But bizarrely, because all the heavy lorries with close coupled trailers were using that as a wee cut through, rather than going down to the roundabout outside of Les Essarts, which is right at the bottom of the hill. Great Chinese restaurant there used to be down there as well, by the way. We used to stop down the way to and from Le Mans. But because the lorries were doing that with the close coupled rear wheels on the trailers, it dug all the tarmac up and brought the cobbles back up again. Worth a go to go down and see that, particularly if you're heading down to Le Mans, just on the south side of Rouen, past the burned out church. Look at it, find it. The big TV mast is a good place to aim for. Find out what you can about that, and then drive around it slowly. And as you're coming back up the far side, stop, walk into the forest. There was about 3 or 4 different iterations of that track. The cutout in the middle of the forest is still there. Some of the old stuff you can still walk that has the gravel tracks around the outside of it. It's part of still a country walk that's there. Park your car, do it, and imagine what was going on in European Formula 2 until what Bruce and I would still think was relatively recent. I've got a piece of the old pit lane complex there from when Jeremy Shaw, Martin Haven, myself, Eve, and a couple of others were going down there, and Jeremy traipsed off in the trees and went, "This is where I put my tent up between these 2 trees in 19 whatever it was." And some of the old concrete was still there, so I picked up a big lump of concrete which was painted in Gulf blue, still had the reinforcement behind it, and brought that home. Great place to be. When were they? How late were they still racing at Rouen-les-Essarts, Bruce?
Well, I think through to the Formula 3 raced there until 1993. I went there in 91 or 92. But the thing that really got me was A, that they were still racing on it, and B, gradient is the thing you don't understand at circuits until you go there. And when you rise up, the Nouveau Monde hairpin is at the very bottom of the hill. But as you come back up, there's a right kink, a left kink, and then there's a tight left. And if you go straight on, you can fall down a ravine. And I think it was Brian Redmond did that at Virage 500. And I knew about that, and I got there, I went, oh, it really is a ravine. It's astonishing. Through the trees, down the bank. I'm fairly sure it was Redmond, but I mean, it was a circuit that famously used to bite very, very hard indeed.
Yeah, and coming up the hill from Nouvelle Monde, I remember going up through the S's there, and you can see the trees on the right-hand side, and, you know, they're very, very mature trees. Yeah, but you're only seeing the top 15% of those trees. The rest of them are way down in that ravine. Yeah, you're spot on. And I sort of think of that about the TT, which comes around at absolutely the wrong time normally for us, because we're always been busy with Le Mans 24 hours. And as a big motorcycle fan, it's one of the things I want to do. I've got some good friends from Greenlight TV in the Isle of Man, on the Isle of Man, and I've been to the Isle of Man a few times, and I love it. I really love to go there for the TT, and I've never managed to do it, and I would really love to do that. And there's a couple of other things that still are on the wish list, but we've been very fortunate in what we've done down the years to be able to tick off quite a few of these things. Bathurst was one of my favourites, which I did 7 or 8 years ago now, which I should have done 15 years before then. I had a distant relative who built engines. Won his class actually, Bruce Hindhaugh, in late 60s in a Toyota 1000, believe it or not, when it was still a multi-class race. Then built the engines for Pete Brock, the Hindhaugh Gowan engines in the back in the Tirana days for Peter Brock when he was having one of his famous fallout with the factory in the yellow car. Won there. Marvellous. Brno recently, went to Brno, a couple of years ago now. That was one of my latter circuits that was the first time at. Went round the old track there, the old long circuit there. That certainly worth a look. There's a lot of good books, Bruce, about lost circuits. Give you a chance to plug one of yours.
Hold on, I'm turning around, having a little look at the shelf. But yes, loads and loads. And there are some books specifically about lost circuits, but read them. And wherever you're going, if you're making a trek to a contemporary circuit, try and see if there's one you can pick off. And I'll tell you, in fact,
John,
the drive from Sydney up to Bathurst, if you stop in the Blue Mountains, I went
Catalina Raceway.
Not knowing. Was it Catalina?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I literally went to a bookshop about 2 blocks away
from
there, and I only discovered it when I got back. I thought that was somewhere further away, kicking myself.
Oh, I've walked around the whole track.
Awfully tricky circuit.
Horror. Oh, walked round the whole circuit there, and it is a beautiful decline.
Yeah.
Katoomba. It's a Katoomba, isn't it? Yeah. Catalina Park. Oh man! And when you think what was racing around there, the equivalent of Formula 5000s, then it was restored. Go and look on your favourite video site, Rallycross. They had a Rallycross circuit there relatively recently in Hindhaugh and Bruce speak. Go and have a look at Catalina Park Raceway, Katoomba, New South Wales. Find it if you're driving up. There's 2 ways that you can go up from Sydney to Bathurst. One is to go the old Bell of Line Road, Bell's line of road, and the other one is to go up past Katoomba. And do both, because both of them are worth doing. But you must go to Katoomba and have a scooch around Catalina Park. Couldn't get the car on it. It's all closed up, but you can still walk around it. And it's still got some of the old signage, all the old railway sleepers marking the edge of the track. There's a bit of old rusty Armco, bit of subsidence, the far side of the track. Absolutely extraordinary. Then when you go back and watch the old video of it, it puts it all in perspective. Love that sort of stuff. Love it. What we got left? Oh, we're inside the last half an hour. Doesn't time fly when you're enjoying yourself? See, Peter, this is what you've let yourself in for, coming to be part of this crew.
I have to say, I've one very old circuit that intrigues me is Avis. That was just on the edge. There's a lot of urban myths around Avis. It was just on the edge of the east-west border in Berlin, and they actually raced. In fact, Dario Franchitti raced there in DTM in the mid-90s, but it was obviously quite a different circuit then than what it was in period when Richard von Frankenberg went through what was an extraordinary banked oval there, and it was amazing crowds used to come to Avis because of course it was a good place for those from the east to come and watch some motorsports. Huge amounts of attention, which was great. But we've got a particular prankster and Rolex 24-hour, multiple Rolex 24-hour winner watching us tonight, John, and Jordan Taylor making his usual comments about drivers and their headlight flashes.
Excellent. JT, all good. Doing great work as ever, Jordan, and part of a racing dynasty in the United States. I am absolutely certain that this race will be on his wish list. And by the way, we were talking about Sami Matti Trogen, the Scandinavian driver. He is here this weekend, Peter, isn't he?
Yes.
He's in the number 102 Walkenhorst car, which has my favourite sponsor, a very helpful sponsor to me. It's Alpecin anti-balding shampoo is all over that car. Not the shampoo itself, their branding. And that's the car that Sammy Matty's in.
German engineering, where you
That's
need it.
it. There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. For your hair. Very good. We'll keep an eye on that 102 car. It's the M6, isn't it? The Walkenhorst car. Dries Van Ter still behind the wheel of the number 15 Audi. Out in the full darkness now. Dropping down to Brunchen. Then climbing up from the exit of Brunchen, using a little bit of the block paving on the left-hand side through the ice curve. Very bright headlights nowadays, of course, on the cars. He's set quite low, actually. The road in front of him, perfectly illuminated. I think at the speeds they were going, I would quite like something a bit further in the distance, but where the trees are close, you do get the advantage of that tunnel effect. And that does help. When it opens up a wee bit, then it is a bit different. There's one or two wee patches of fog as well as the temperature inversion kicks in at this stage in the evening. In behind the GT Tyres GT4 Audi, that's the number 53 car that has just gone through on the entrance to the Kleine Carousel. Now, make sure he hits the... sorry, that was the... Yes, that was the Kleine Carousel. Make sure he hits the final and third apex of the Gallows Hill corner onto the Dottinger Ho. And Bruce, news of a change at the sharp end of the field.
New best placed Audi is now up into fourth place. Michele Beretta, Phoenix Racing, R8 LMS, 1 minute, that'd be a bit fanciful. 8 minutes, 21.8 seconds. That puts him 0.775 of a second down on the 77 BMW Junior Team M6, which is still top of the charts. But we've got 5 cars covered by the top second. And John, you always talk about how, half a second on a regular circuit's a bit of a gap here, but a second around a nearly 26 kilometre circuit really is nothing. We've got 5 cars. We've got the number within that bracket of time, and others starting to chip away as well. Suddenly an improvement from the other car from the Phoenix Audi scene, the number 15 entry, but that only goes up to 12th place. But really that was a great lap from Michele Beretta. Saw him smiling and looking very relaxed in the pits about half an hour ago, maybe slightly longer. It moves very quickly indeed, but certainly out on the track doing a great job there. Michele Beretta, 4th fastest.
Over 20 classes in this race. We haven't talked about the leaders in the other class. We've been so transfixed by what's going on at the front of the field, where Klaus Bachler leads for Faulkner Motorsport in SP9. It is the Glickenhaus that leads in SPX. They're 24th. Felipe Fernandez laser with the time for that car. It is the True Racing KTM Crossbow in 32nd that leads the Cup X class. That is the number 114 machine. 350 in 35th position leads SP Pro. It's the Black Falcon Team ADAC Porsche GT3 Cup MR. Chris Meese has just come into the pits in the SP7 leader. That's the GT3 Porsche Cup car, number 80 of Huber Motorsport. Black Falcon, Mercedes AMG GT4 in the SP8T category in 44th position for the 36 car, leads their class. AT, this is the alternatively fueled car, and this is the Four Motors Bio concept machine, Porsche 911 GT3 Cup, and that leads the alternatively fueled. And Schmudo, the pop star, rock star that is on that, saw him do his gig at the Hockenheim Ring when we were there for DTM doing some work a few years ago. That's in 47th position. And Klaus Bachler, top of the shop in the 33, by the way, for Faulkner Motorsports in the 911 GT3R. Let's go through the rest of the class leaders. SP10, Schnitzelarm Racing GmbH Mercedes-AMG GT4. The 34 car leads that SP10 class in 48th. 49th is TCR leader. That's the Hyundai i30N, the 831 car. That's in the pits. G-Tech competition lead Cup 3 in one of the myriad of Porsche Caymans in a variety of classes. It's the 305 in 54th position. 63 leads Cup 5. That's the Cup 5 is the new BMW M2 Club Sport racing cars. The older cars, what are now the 240s, used to be the 235s. They've got their own category. We'll come to them in a moment. So it's Schubert Motorsport in the 890 that leads that Cup 5 in 63rd position. That's the 890 car. 67th is the number 10. That leads SP3T, the Max Kreuzer Racing VW Golf GTI TCR. The GT Tyre Motorsport Audi 53. The car that we were just talking about, that's in 71st and leading SP8. The SP4T leader is the 86 Porsche Cayman GTS in 79th. Adrenaline Motorsports have a Porsche Cayman S981 leading V6. That's the 131 car in 80th position. 83rd is V3T leader. That's the 168 Team Mathol Racing Porsche 718 Cayman S. 320 BMW G20 is leading V2T for Adrenaline Motorsport, another Adrenaline car, the 330. On the side of that, that's the number of that car. That's an 88. Volta Strycek leading for the Foxtail Manta, the 125 in 95th position in that what was it, Peter? You called it earlier on Dolly mixture. I was going to call it licorice also. We were both thinking of confectionery there, but it is Volker who leads that in 95th position. The BMW 240i class is led by, guess what, a BMW M240i from Adrenaline Motorsport. That's the 231 car in 96th position. It's another Adrenaline Motorsport team, Porsche Cayman, that leads the V5 class. That's the 141 in 101st position. The Hoffa Racing BMW, which had a couple of spins earlier on today, is in the pits but still leading SP6 in their M3 CSL in 107th position. Right behind them on the timing screens in V4, the leader there is a venerable E90 BMW 325 straight 6. Great motor in the 151 car. That's in 108th position. 111th position is SP4, another straight 6 BMW. This is an E90 325 in SP4 for the 325 numbered car. And Hyundai Motorsport i20N is leading SP2T, and that is the final of our class leaders, the 165 machine in the pits in 113th position. Phew-wee. We won't be doing the full rundown of all the classes every hour during the race. We'll split them up so it doesn't take me quite as long as that to go through them all. Something must have happened whilst I was talking about that. And I still reckon, Bruce, we've already seen 122 cars doing a lap this evening, or at least today, should I say. The Dacia Logan has done some extra laps this evening. It did do a full lap this morning.
Yeah, no, you're correct. I was waiting to see if we got up to the 125 cars I had my entry list at the start of the day. Those final three would pop out. They have yet to do so. You alluded to the fact that things keep on changing. You name at the top of the charts. Falcon Motorsports, Klaus Bachler just banged in at 8 minutes 20.237. Second lap, so fastest by 0.8 of a second from the BMW Junior Team M6 at the moment. But will there be improvements around the final lap? I'm not seeing many pink or green timing sectors, so perhaps not. But for Klaus Bachler, of course, we heard from him before the show, and he's not just driving the 33 Porsche for Falcon Motorsports, but the 44 as well. He's greedy for success here.
That is, frankly, that is just greedy. There's no need for that as well. Thanks to Alan Prosser, screen grab that appears to be showing a Toyota Gazoo Racing Altis back out on the circuit, being passed by Falcon Motorsports Klaus Bachler not so very long ago. So keep an eye open for that Team Thailand car with Natnavudu Charan Sukamatana as listed as part of the driving talent in there. Oh, how much fun we had with all of the Thai names when we were doing Race of Champions out in the National Stadium, the Ramanganjala Stadium a few years ago. Usual chaos in the pit lane, swinging cars around into their sort of not quite 45 degrees, but certainly at a jaunty angle, at the sort of echelon angle. The PWT Mercedes of Maxi Goetz is in. That is the number 7 car, which is entered by Get Speed. Being so used down the years, Bruce, to seeing those in the bright red Vodafone colours.
Things move on, John. We have to try and catch up, but that's a car. Look at that driving crew. Maxi Goetz, Danny Juncadella, Raffaele Marcello and Fabian Schiller. That has to be, if the Mercedes can rise to the task, be a car very much heading for the top 3 in this race. But so far, Mercedes has been the mark among the German gang that has not been really at the sharp end of the field. It's been Porsche, BMW and Audi, so you can imagine there is a huge pressure down at Mercedes. In fact, the best placed Mercedes at the moment is in 13th place, and it's not the one we were talking about, but number 6, one of the 2 cars from the HRT team, the Hout Racing team. And in fact, that was the car that was fastest in first qualifying today, but it slid away from them a little.
And extraordinarily, in that team of many talents, Peter, that in that number 7 car, that Bruce has just read out, that I mean, it's almost a who's who of endurance racing, but yet it takes success here.
I had to say, it took me, I had to double and triple and quadruple check my notes when putting that. Maximilian Goetz, Daniel Juncadella, Raffaele Marciello and Fabian Schiller, none of them in that number 7 Get Speed Mercedes have won the Nurburgring 24-hour. Of course, Raffaele Marciello crashed out of the lead in the horrible rain not long before the race was actually stopped. And you remember the images of Raphael with his helmet visor open and just with his head in his hands. And I remember watching Raphael make Lawrence Vantor and El Bamber look pretty ordinary at Macau a couple of years ago, and that's something you never see. But it just shows you how this race, she chooses who she wants to take the silverware.
That's often said about races that provide a particular challenge. Bathurst, Pikes Peak, International Hill Climb, here at the Nurburgring, Le Mans to a certain extent as well. Down through the years, Bruce, we've seen all kinds of manufacturers throw cubic currency denominations at Le Mans and being stymied by a small, sharp piece of gravel left on the track by a fairly innocuous off by somebody else hours earlier, or a literally a 50-cent item that's gone wrong on the cars. And that, I think, is one of the great, in some ways for us as spectators and enthusiasts, I'm sure not for the car companies, but that is one of the great joys of endurance racing, that it's very difficult to buy yourself a victory either in financial terms or technology terms. There's an element of luck that still has to go along with you getting to the sharp end of the field.
Bob Wallach is all I can say, who did everything bar win Le Mans, and and many times over. You just have to accept there is that hard to quantify, impossible to quantify element that is out there. And again, just looking at that number 7 crew, the fact that Maxi Goetz hasn't won this race, he's been a top-level GT racer in Germany for a very long time, but it hasn't come his way as yet. Could it be this time around? But I just haven't seen the pace from Mercedes this year on the Nordschleife. Maybe it's not so good over the curbs, over the bumps.
Wow.
And the rival manufacturers are better at riding it, because this is not Monza. This is not a circuit like Paul Ricard where the curbs are flat and you can use them without effect. Here there is cause and effect, and going up and coming down, certainly it doesn't seem to suit the Mercedes.
And one of the things about experience here is you need to know the curbs that you can and indeed must use, and the ones that you absolutely 100% have to avoid. And certainly coming, if you come up the hill from Bergwerk, the curbs look fairly flat in the first part. of that rise through the 3 lefts, you don't really need to use them. And then as you then beginning to go through mid curve and that sort of area, you kind of feel like you want to use them and you can't use them because they're not a flat curb. They look like a curb on a city street. They're not at 90 degrees to the track, but my goodness, they're not far off. And that's fast through there. It's a lift, down a gear, and then straight back on the throttle. And then as you go back up again, there's that little wiggle before you get to the base of the hill, before you turn around and climb right and turn up to the Caracciolo carousel. And that last curve on the left-hand side, oh, it's so inviting. I'll nail that. You nailed that. You're going to take a wheel off. It's really, really important that you know your way around here, because those are seconds. And when you know, we talked about that beat, the first of the Mercedes AMGs, Bruce being down in 14th position, but they're 3.5 seconds off. That's all. The 0.08's 5 seconds away from the KCMG Porsche, who are a 10th away from Frickadelli and Nick Tandy, who is half a second away from Rover Racing and Philip Eng. You know, these are tiny margins, and knowing where you can cheat the curbs and find time and where you can't is so important. New fastest lap, Peter Mackay, right to the top, and it's a new manufacturer at the top as well today on this fast Thursday.
Oh, it's lighting up here, and there's just 10 minutes on the clock. Mirko Bortolotti has gone fastest in a Lamborghini Huracan with Hankook tyres on that particular car. So wow. The timing screen is lighting up. It did not seem that long ago. In fact, it seemed for most of this day that it's been a Mercedes on top, and then all of a sudden everyone's just pulled the cork out the bottle, lit the touch paper, and fired in all these fastest lap times. So I wonder if we'll maybe see a bit more movement over the last, of course, there's 9.5 minutes on the clock, but of course, if you get over just across the line in time, you get another lap. So really, in effect, we've maybe got another 15 or 20 minutes, actually, in fact.
Spot on, Peter. Lamborghini Porsche in second now. Lance David Arnold, last time around, was his fastest lap at 8:20, but it's all of a sudden it's a second and a half at the front of the field. So Hankook, then Falcon tyres. Bruce, what do we reckon the BMW Junior team in third are on, the 77 cars? That'll be 3 different tyre manufacturers in the top 3, won't it?
I have a double quick. I explained my little faux pas earlier where I saw Falcon on a lot of cars. I thought, gosh, a lot of cars are running on Falcon this year, and then found that was just a regular sponsor. Can I just point out, though, John, that it's 5 seconds improvement since this morning's qualifying session that Bortolotti's found, and it was only a 3.5 second gain until Bortolotti slotted that lap in. So that really was a quantum leap.
Matteo Caroli, sorry, Bruce. Matteo Caroli just up to third in the Grello 911 Manthey Racing Porsche 821.0. Still only one car below the 820. Bruce, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just doing a little tyre research. So you're quite right. Hankook fastest on Bortolotti's FFF Racing Team Lamborghini. Second place, it's the Falcon Motorsport Porsche. No clues given there for what tyres they're on. And third place, Manthey Racing on Michelin. The BMW Junior Team, I have them down as Michelin as well, but I need to double check by double checking, if you follow my drift.
Yes.
They are Michelin, yeah.
They are Michelin. Okay, thank you. Luca Engstler. Out in the 831 Hyundai i30N TCR with 7 3/4 minutes to go, and just diving in through the back entrance to the pits, and he is coming into the pits. And we had, in the group of cars that Luca was catching, we had all 3 options taken there. The KTM Crossbow went around to go back around the start-finish line. 3 of the cars, including Luca, went into the pit lane, and one of the cars, I'm sorry I didn't really notice who it was, went out on to the hats and back. So right now there are 3 options at the end of the Grand Prix circuit. Onto the Nurburgring, stay to the left. In the middle, you can go back through the chicane. It's a manufactured chicane with sort of tyre bundles there. Back round where the cones are and onto the start-finish straight, and have another go at the at the Grand Prix circuit, or you can stay right and come in through the normal entrance from the Grand Prix track into the pit lane. And we had all three of them used at the same point there. 6.5 minutes to go.
Just a note on TCR. I think the Hyundai team will be very, very happy because, of course, the i30N, which is quickest right now, is well established. But the new Elantra, brand new model, of course, only half a second off the pace.
Yeah.
I think Hyundai would be delighted with that.
Yeah, the sort of slightly longer body on that car and the sort of fastback bodywork on it. As we mentioned earlier, Hyundai, one of the manufacturers who have extensively used the Nurburgring for testing. They've got a performance centre not too far away, and they've used this race as well to some effect. Alan Prosser says, why has nobody ever integrated headlights of sorts into the top of the windscreen? Surely drivers would be able to see a lot further unless it's not allowed. I think there are regs, and Peter has been trawling the regs, about how high. It's a bit like Department of Transport construction and use, as we would have said back in my dad's day of policing. And Bradley, although he never did traffic, so he wasn't very good on con and use regs. There are regulations about how high lights can be off the ground. So you can't have Baja style roof lights or windscreen height mounted lights. Nowadays, it's a good question, Alan, in fairness. Nowadays, with the advances in lighting technology, and by the way, if you've never run LED lights on your race car and you race in the dark, you're in for a treat when you do. I've got some LEDs on the mighty BMW K1600 GT, Clearwater as they're called. Martin Short sorted those out and fitted them for me from Roll Centre, and that makes a huge difference on the motorcycle, despite the fact that the BMW's got a gyroscopically controlled light that goes round corners and straightens itself up when you lean over and all of that. But I remember racing at Anglesey in the Race of Remembrance in a MG, a V6 MG, which had pretty good headlights actually, twin headlights on that car. We had a light bar on that, and when I remember to turn it on, it was like turning night to day. And so when we got to the quarter 24-hour race for Aston Martin Lagonda in the Vantage GT8 GT4 car, and they had two wing light bars mounted low down in the grille underneath the bumper, but set quite far out so that it spread the light all the way across the ground. Made a huge difference. And so the lighting technology, Alan, I think has changed massively down through the years, to the point actually where we've seen at Le Mans down through the years, drivers asking if some of the normal road furniture, the road signs, could be covered over because that is reflective, and it's actually quite blinding, the amount of light that's coming out of the race cars now, Bruce. And we've seen that happen for a few years now at Le Mans, when they trailed their laser lights and the LED matrix controlled lights on the prototypes down through the years.
Yeah, no, it's been a massive step forward, and because if ever you look at any onboard footage from 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they weren't quite candles behind bits of glass, but
minus lamps.
Yes, sort of the equivalent.
Yes, you probably had the same sort of lighting capability when you had a dynamo strapped to the back wheel of your bike that had 3-speed Sturmley Archer gears. For those of you who know what I'm talking about, you know how far back I'm going and how rubbish those lights were. And of course, as you slowed down, just when you needed to be seen, as you slowed down, they got dimmer. And when you were standing still, you had no lights on at all, front or rear. Whose bright idea was that? So Mirko Bertolotti in the Lamborghini Huracan, still on top of the pile for Hankook Triple F Racing Team. 1.6 seconds the lead now to Falcon, who are back out again. That's David Arnold about halfway around the lap at the moment. Improvement on the last lap around for Kevin Estre, we mentioned that. Who else improved before pitting Last time around, that was the Octane Ferrari, 11th position for them, 8:22, 8:24 for Manuel Metzger and the Mercedes team's HRT, number 4. That's down 21st position, but still, 21st position, Peter, but only 6 seconds. And in a lap of 8.5 minutes, that's a very small percentage for those guys.
It is absolutely extraordinary, the depth of talent and depth of quality of entry that we've got in SP9. You know, with all the, you know, you got Lamborghini, Porsche, BMW, Audi, Ferrari. They're all in there, all fighting on a level playing field, and it's just. I think actually in this qualifying session, it's been so close that actually it could be more who's getting a clean lap. That's always a factor at the Nurburgring, of course, but I've got to think that Lamborghini are going to be very, very happy with the way things are. But I still feel we've got a tiny little bit of movement just yet. I also think the Frickadelli cars, I think they're keeping I feel they're keeping an ace up their sleeve.
Really?
Of course, yeah, I think so. I think they were 1-2 in the qualifying race. I think they're keeping it pretty quiet at the moment, and I've got an eye on them for the win on Sunday afternoon. And I tell you what, there wouldn't be a dry eye in the place
Absolutely
if
not.
Frickadelli were to get their first N24 win, if they did.
Sabine Schmitz, one of her BMW winning cars, will be doing some demo laps before the full field rolls off, about 10 minutes before the full field rolls off at 3 Central European time, so they'll be out about 3 o'clock. Alan, wasn't Alan. Who was it? Stand by. It was George Jarrett that tweeted us at RSL_studio. Do the slower cars have to use yellow lights, or can they use white? It used to be great seeing the yellows at Le Mans. Shame to drop that idea. There was a very good reason for the yellow lights at Le Mans, George. It comes from the fact that it used to be the law in France to have yellow lights on road cars, and because it was on a public road, the road-derived cars had to use yellow-tinted headlamps, and it stayed for a wee while, even when that regulation in France disappeared, to make a distinction between GT cars and prototypes, so that you could tell if it was yellow lights coming up behind you, then it was a GT car. If it was white, it was a prototype. The problem came that the GT cars were getting faster and faster, and in all honesty, the yellow tinted glass perspex whatever was actually not as efficient in terms of lighting the road. And albeit Le Mans was getting lighter with more lighting towers around, so that 24-hour TV could work, particularly 10-15 years ago when the US networks were taking full live coverage. But it was thought it would be a good idea then to waive that tradition, as it were. But as far as I know, Peter, and you've been scrolling through the regs, I think everybody can use white lights here. In fact, I'm certain they can. And there are some regs about how many additional lights you can have and LED light bars, etc. But other than that, everybody can use LED white lights.
I think I maybe remember reading something about that before falling asleep in my porridge, reading through the technical regulations. Yes, it was very, as always, very specific on what you can run. Of course, you've got to run the mandatory LED light system as well, which gives information on who's in the car and also where the position in class is as well. I did remember that, but we spent most of my time trying to search through the regulations to get the minimum pit stop times, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Oh, don't even go there.
Oh my goodness.
That's an algorithm. That is applied mathematics level 5 Open University course. Somebody with a cable knit sweater with leather patches on the sleeve will be along in the wee small hours on Saturday to explain that for us. Daniel M at 42 Ice has found it. It says headlights must be in the original position. Additional lighting allowed must be in the grille or in front of the bodywork. We've seen that before as well, of course. So, yeah, the Manthey car in the pits at the moment has additional LED lights mounted down where the normal fog lights would be in a Porsche 911. Nice to see that some familiar faces are down in the pit lane, including Franz Conrad standing behind his Lamborghini. Franz, what a stalwart of endurance racing. One of the first people to run the Celine S7R when I was involved with that project at RML, and won Sebring 12 hours, first time out against the might of the Corvettes. That was a big turnaround. So that's about it then for Thursday. And we have a new top time to talk about, and that goes to the Lamborghini Huracan, not from the Conrad team, but from the Hankook Tyres Triple F Racing team, an 8:18.575. All of the sessions counting, of course, as qualifying sessions. It is Falcon Motorsports in second with the 33 car. They're 44 down in 9th position. It's another Porsche in third for the number 911 from Manthey Racing, very much the local team. Have been known to drive their cars on the public road from Moispath to the paddock here at the Nurburgring Nordschleife. The rest of the top 10, 77 BMW in 4th position, Rutronic and Porsche number 3 and 5th, Audi Sport Team Car Collection number 2 in 6th, 7th the Ferrari from Wochenspiegel, Team Manthey with the WTM powered by Phoenix Ferrari number 22, Phoenix Racing in 8th with the 11 Audi, then the 44, as I mentioned, from Falcon, the Porsche, BMW from Valkenhorst in 10th position in the 101. That's your top 10, and a fairly clear run today. Just checked through, by the way, the Toyota Altis wasn't back out. That was one of the other Toyotas that was back out on the circuit. But Bruce Jones, precious little incident in terms of contact, either with other cars or certainly with the barriers. I'm sure there have been some technical issues. We've seen one or two cars grind to a halt. But in terms of panel beating overnight, very little work to do, to be honest, before Friday.
Unbelievably clean and wonderfully clean. But you know what? The more the drivers come and compete in the rounds of the Nürburgring Langstrecken Series, or the VLN as it used to be,